Good morning, afternoon, evening, whichever one suits you, take your pick. Welcome back to the Mind Pod. Today's episode is a little bit different. I got two people on, and they are Neil and Alvin, the two co-founders of a company called Guide, which is built for aspiring entrepreneurs. I've known both Alvin and Neil for quite some time. Neil's background is in Endeavor, which was supporting entrepreneurs through their journey, and Alvin was living that operational life as a CFO of a technology startup and then into a scale-up. We get into both of their backgrounds and how they eventually came together to start Guide and where it all came from and what the dreams, goals and ambitions are of the business. I think one thing which was common throughout the conversation with them was the idea that starting a company is hard anyway. A lot of fear, uncertainty, doubt, a lot of stress and pressure financially and mentally. And the whole reason they started Guide was to provide that support from the very get-go to those aspiring entrepreneurs that might not necessarily have the means and access to all the information they need to make a good go of starting something for themselves. So, without further ado, this is my conversation with Neil and Alvin from Guide. I hope you guys have a good time. Can you introduce Neil for me?
When I think of Neil, I always start with this story, right? Like the first time I met Neil was when I was still with GoCo, like previous startup, and he was still with Endeavor.
Okay.
And this was a guy who kind of like, in the middle of COVID, came to me and said, like, "Hey, I know everyone's having a tough time, right? So are we. Here's a bill."
I thought it was going to be like a super positive story. Look, I know you're having a tough time, but you got to pay.
Yeah. We never did pay, in fairness, and but we struck a couple of conversations around that, right? Like what he was doing for Endeavor.
What was your relationship with Neil at the time then?
So Ron, who's the CEO for GoCo, was just kind of, what do you say, inducted into as an Endeavor entrepreneur.
Accepted. And what is Endeavor? Maybe you can. Endeavor.
So Endeavor is a global non-profit that supports high-growth entrepreneurs around the world. They're based in New York, and there's a Malaysia chapter. And GoCo is one of the, I think back then was 21 companies. So that's how I get to know Ron and Alvin.
Okay, and what was your role in Endeavor?
So I'm the portfolio manager and also account manager tied to GoCo. So it's my responsibility to support GoCo as an account.
Oh, really? So you were there to support, but then during COVID you turned up and demanded a bill. Okay.
Yeah, and collection as well.
Yeah. No, and I mean, to be fair, we got quite a bit of value out of being part of Endeavor.
Yeah.
Right. Just so happened, this thing called COVID wasn't exactly kind to travel-related companies, and we were one of them, right? And in no uncertain terms, I told Neil, "Look, not going to pay, but still want some help." And from there, we kind of kept on and off together until we met again a couple of years later. And that's when I found out, so that's what you do for Endeavor, right? Like, thanks for the support. But then he had also left, and I had also left GoCo by the time. And yeah, I mean, my sense of, Neil, even from the first time I met, was like, he was this person who really tries to go out of his way to help. Right, so even when I told him to kind of like piss off, right, not gonna pay, but still want some help, like he didn't immediately say, "Yeah, you're not worth my time anymore," kind of thing, right? Like, and to some extent, that was kind of like first impressions that stuck with me, and yeah, we were connected again through another event and from there it was like, yeah, you was kind of like telling about this thing that you wanted to do to be super helpful to startups all over again.
Just before you go off
Yeah.
on one, because you're doing the thing that Neil normally does. So do you want to introduce Alvin?
Yeah, sure.
Who is Alvin?
Alvin.
Mm.
Yeah.
So basically we have Neil, the guy that will go out of his way to help all the entrepreneurs in the world, even if they don't pay.
Yeah.
That's in summary, right?
That's it. Yeah, that's
So-
in summary.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think for me, Alvin is always still is the CFO. Yeah.
The CFO.
Yeah. One of the one of the few top CFO that you can really count.
Ooh.
Yeah, with your fingers in Malaysia that has venture experience. Yeah, that's how I think until today, like still I say with pride, it's like, hey, you know, Alvin is one of the few, you know, that raise money all the way from C and then, you know, sold a company.
Mm.
A lot of people still, you know, want him to be part of them. But he's stuck with me.
You stuck it. So it's okay. So we basically got a sales and relationship guy, and then we've got and then we got the finance guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So so did I meet you and then get introduced to Neil, or like how did that happen? So I know you were
Yes.
you were my client.
Yes.
Huh. Did you not know this?
know.
Yeah. So we worked together.
This was back in
GoQuo and now-
2015, and
Was
we
it?
we were trying to scrape. We started off with like very simple projects. I think
Yeah.
I can't remember Sunny.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, Sonny. So
She helped us because we at that time had been just like doing travel event after travel event, and we just had like an insurmountable stack of business cards that we were like, oh shit, no, we're not gonna like key these things
Oh
and
my
create
God.
a CRM. It was started with that.
it was
as
the
a project.
business. It was business cards.
This
It
was
was
business cards. Yes.
physical business cards.
Physical
and
business
it
cards.
came over to collect them, and then
Yeah.
we keyed. Oh my God!
Yes.
Yeah, it was.
We probably had close to 1,000 business cards, I think.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah. That was something that we started with, and
Yeah.
then I think what we then tried to do was kind of scrape a lot of hotel details, and I think like we the next kind of thing that we asked for help was like,
Yeah.
hey, can you find us like the contact details, address, location, like GM or kind of
Yeah, it was all the data aggregation,
Yes.
lead generation.
Correct.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
And then that was when I think you came in, took over the project,
Yeah.
and then I said like, yeah, if you can do this for us, we're gonna put more money on the table, which we did. And then
Did you?
yeah, I think we did.
Hang
And then
on a
we
minute. Do you reckon he did?
That building thing happened to you as well.
doesn't jive, right? But
Yeah, I was gonna say. Okay.
no, I and,
So hang
and
on a minute. So I've known you for 10 years.
Yeah.
Plus.
10 years
Jeez.
plus.
When was this?
2015?
2015. Yeah, 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I did, I remember Mark told me about that. It's like this super, AI thing, that
Yeah.
help people to turn contacts, like physical name cards into database.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just before we get into like the nuts and bolts of like history and all that kind of stuff, one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of chat to you both today, and this is going to be my first foray into like a partnership kind of conversation. Normally it's like a one-on-one, so
Yeah.
I think it'd be good to hear like both sides of the story, like from a co-founder point of view as well. It's like how you sort out one another and basically the relationship that you built and like coming together to build out the vision. It was Ignition Chamber, but maybe it's something before that, and then through to Guide. So just kind of want to hear a bit about the backstory. I don't know how you'd like to kind of start with that, but you mentioned like you kind of knew each other through the Endeavor days.
Yep.
That's how you initially met, but then
Mm.
kind of you went off on your different ways. You built and sold a company.
Yeah.
And then where did you come together again then after that?
2021. It was that event.
Yeah,
that
2021.
Alvin just mentioned.
Yeah.
And I think to where Alvin stopped just now, like I kind of want to go back into the scene and say, hey, how do we? I think the mission of Endeavor back then, I was like truly internalized in me. It's like, hey, this is part of my identity. I enjoy helping people, and I see.
Where does that come from? Wanting to help people.
I think it came from very young. Ever since middle school, I was always joining a lot of St. John Ambulance, all this charity organization.
Yeah.
I was very mission, impact, charity centric. Before I step out to the market.
Noble causes.
Yes.
Was it a, I don't know, was it an external influence or something you've just been drawn to? Like, where'd it come from?
I think I just like the ideology of, having a purpose, and the purpose is about helping other people finding their purpose or fulfilling their goals.
Is that because somebody helped you in the past do exactly that, or the fact that looking back it was something that was missing from you?
Okay, I think there's a funny backstory to this. Like, just wind back to, I think back then it was in my primary school days. And, just like any other teachers, they will ask, what would be your ambition when you grow up, right?
Yeah.
Guess what? My first choice was to be a monk.
Okay.
And the second one was to be a soldier. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so then what I realized is that the inner reason, or the reason behind, and the common denominator of these two roles, first is to inspire people to find the truth. I kind of like that Buddha thing. It was also because I was very exposed to Buddhism back then.
Right.
Yeah, spending a fair amount of time jumping from church to Buddhist center. And I thought that, if there's someone, I think Buddha was like, a source of truth, the way of life. And being a monk, a practitioner of Buddhism, and a source of enlightenment for other people sounds like a cool thing to do. Right. And what you need to do is just to train yourself intellectually to find the wisdom and to share the wisdom to other people. So that's one. Two, why soldier is because the idea of serving other people's need and protecting other people is such a noble thing to do. And I think since then, it carried upon a lot of decisions in my life. The search of truth and to find ways to get the truth to help others to fulfill their purpose in life.
Who inspired that? You can't say Alvin.
Maybe my mom.
Yeah?
Yeah. So, I spent a lot of... So my dad is a businessman. So that's what they call it back then for entrepreneur.
A businessman.
Yeah, businessman.
God, that conjures up a certain image,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Business,
yeah. And so I spent a lot of time with my mom because obviously he's very busy. He goes out early in the morning. I don't get to see him most of the time. Then coming back late. So I think my mom is the caretaker of the family. He's a full-time housewife.
Right.
So I think through his, nurturing, being a housewife, she has been carrying me quite a lot. And I love that feeling of being cared of. I think it sort of baked into me that, maybe if I can do the same for other people, it wouldn't be nice. For those who didn't get the same amount of love. I think care is always being, I think the key growing. I think because I'm blessed with love, I think I want to share the same thing as well. I think it's also natural for me to do the same for other people, whether it's through sharing, actually helping. So that's how, it kind of sticks with me until today.
Did you draw a lot from your dad at the same time, being an entrepreneur and a businessman, and then seeing how you can marry the two together?
I think so.
Pun intended.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, nice.
Great one.
Yeah, I'm going to write that down for later. Yeah.
I think so. So I admire my dad quite a lot. So back then, being an adolescent and teenager back then, I was comparing. I think partly my family, my dad's relative side are being compared quite a lot. That, hey, because my dad is the only one out of the 5 siblings. He's the only one that choose to be an entrepreneur. The rest, just like any other Asian families, they are accountants, chartered accountants,
Doctors, engineers.
Yeah, exactly. We have all those.
Really?
Except him, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so he's the only one that loves sports, great in craftsmanship. So what I meant is that, so my dad was a precision engineer.
Oh, okay.
So he didn't actually finish his high school. So I think he dropped off at middle school. And he went to a vocational school. So ever since he was a technician and worked himself up to be a sort of like a chief technician or chief engineer of a steel stamping molding company.
All right.
American owned back then. So then he decided to take a leap of faith and become his own entrepreneur in being the service provider to them, a supplier, a subcontractor to them. And back then, so going back to the story where I was, I think during adolescent time, I questioned my dad's entrepreneurial choice. So I was doing a apple-to-apple conversation. Hey, Dad, if you stay this corporate, you would have driving a BMW, and why are we still staying in this, terrace house, owning just a local.
So essentially, you were
vehicle.
sent to test your dad.
And to myself.
Because it's like, oh yeah, why aren't you keeping up with the Joneses? Why aren't you going down this route of like having a big house and driving a BMW? And he's like, he's stuck to his guns.
Yeah. So he said, but all of this, I think what struck me back then, he was, but whatever we provide today is fully in our own control. So
wisdom.
yeah, so we don't have. I think the only boss that I have, him, was his client, and that is something is fully in control of his career life, and whatever he's provided is provided through his bare hands, through a skill, right? So then that led me to think. I think then I didn't actually know what he actually trying to see us at back then, but still BMW is a BMW, right? Right. My cousin would have all these fancy toys, but I only have one set of them, right?
Yeah.
But then I think the real realization, the train actually hit me. I think it was only quite recent. It was like, wow, to have full control of your life, to able to retire at your own terms, with such control of your life is such a powerful thing. I only realized that before I actually left Endeavour. So then that's the point when I start comparing being an employee for other people or being your own employer, like being an entrepreneur. So yeah, I think to your point, I've seen my dad able to turn his skill into craft, to a service, to a service, to a product. So he's able to actually design a mold from scratch. From a piece of paper, an A4 paper just drafting to him, he's able to decipher that into a 3D modeling. And I've seen him actually back then now just connecting everything together, right? He's able to turn that self-learned computer and learning on creating AutoCAD, so CAD files. He invests a lot in computer learning himself. So there was a bookshelf filled with all AutoCAD. Different, like 2004 AutoCAD until the most recent one. So he's like constantly upgrading his computer. I get the benefit of playing Counter-Strike. So yeah, and I get to explore, and I guess that part of building engineering came from him, and the caring and the nurturing part came from my mom. I didn't know, until today that you.
So you got your inspirations and aspirations from a young age. Basically the nurturing side of things, and then how to help people, then the entrepreneurial spirit from your dad. But it's taken this long to get that embedded into you.
Yeah.
But I want to know about from Alvin as well, in terms of did you always know you were going to be an entrepreneur, businessman? Like what was the journey that you went on up to this point?
Probably like a lot of growing up as a kid with a lot of other kind of like middle class suburban kids, right? Everyone kind of like everyone dreams of being rich, right? Everyone's dreams of being like richer than the parents, and the one way to do it was to look at whatever your parents did and then like outdo them, right?
So from a young age, you were in competition with your parents.
Yes.
Oh my god. Okay.
And there was a lot of like, to use the same starting point as Neil, right? Like a lot of that kind of conversations were engraved from when you were kids, right? Like, hey, what does your father do, right? Like, it's a proxy of how rich my friends are. I just want to know, right? Like, and people do the same to you. But a lot of in a lot of ways, I think like we differ quite a bit in that sense. Like, I think what I kind of had to do for myself or imagine a lot of things was to be very self-sufficient.
Right.
I live in a dual income family where mom, dad works. From a very young age, I was taken care of by either my aunt or my grandmother, and probably, if I remember correctly, maybe like late mid, or maybe even as early as like just form 1, so like in that 12, 13 age, I was home by myself a lot, right? I had to learn to take care of myself, and which also meant that I had a lot of time to myself, right? Like a lot of time to kind of like explore, discover, read stuff. So I was one of those like very early young armchair traveler. It was like, well, my way to the universe is kind of like through books and kind of like discovery of meaning. But a lot of that was kind of like done at my own leisure.
Right.
And over time, you're kind of like, hey, I know a lot of useless stuff.
So
yeah.
Because like growing up, like I would be football, outside,
Yep.
playing video games.
Yeah.
Like the idea of reading for me when I was growing up, I mean, it's ironic based on what's happening now, but it just wasn't a thing. I wouldn't pick up a book. I'd rather go out or play video games.
I mean,
Have you always been like a curious child?
Yeah.
I'm not calling you a curious child now, but more of a curious mind. Like,
Yeah. No. But I remember like growing up, like I said, like there's a lot of competition in that sense, like academically, and one of the weirdest things, I still don't remember why I did it, but I think in those days there was a lot of kind of challenge with family members who kind of like in a way wrote me off, like say like, yeah, this is a kid that plays more than anything else, and you're not gonna do really well in your exams, and it's always been like, hey, you know what, like, but this is a way I can profit, right? Like, let's do a deal. What's in it for me if I get all A's, right? Like, I'm gonna prove it. There was always a bit of that push and pull in terms of like motivating factors, and I remember this one time I was like, I was very upset that I didn't get into like, how you streamline classes in your early days in school, right? Like the smartest kids get into one class, the less smart kid gets into the other classes. So I wasn't in that first class, and I was like, fuck me, right? I'm gonna be first in that class because I was not in the best one. So for me to be in the best one, I should be first in this. And I made a deal with my mom and said that, look, if I do this well, you're gonna buy this set of books that I've been eyeing for a long time. Of all things, books. But that was kind of my pathway into viewing what's outside of my neighborhood, outside of my field, outside of my house, right? Like that was kind of that place where I can say, hey, maybe I like this, maybe I want to do something like this, right? But it comes back to a lot of why I say it's a lot different, right? Because I think being with a lot of time in your hands as you're a young kid, you could do a lot of stupid things. I'm glad, like I was somewhere in the middle.
Okay. Good balance.
Yeah, and that was where you kind of like your mind starts to really think like, if I don't do something for myself, I'm gonna be quite irrelevant, right? Like I'm not gonna be even something that I read about in a book in a couple of years' time, right? Like that kind of feeling. And you then start to want to put yourself out there and test yourself, and then like put yourself in competition, and that was a lot of my formative years in terms of kind of reaching out, testing myself out, and then understanding where I stand in kind of like this grand scale of things. Like, where am I the median, and am I the top 5% or am I the bottom 5%? That always kind of like mattered to me.
Oh my god.
And
you ever heard the term comparison is the thief of joy?
yeah,
You're okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
You compare yourself to others, like, oh, I'm better than them. So
yeah,
it's okay.
it's then a case of like knowing exactly what you're good at, where you can improve and where you suck at, and is it worthwhile to invest in the time to improve the things that you suck at,
Right.
versus improving on some of your strengths. Like a lot of that stuck with me as I kind of like journey through university, early career, and then like, yeah, it was kind of one of the driving factors for like self-improvement. It's like that comparative aspect of it is to know like, okay, it in the line of like good things, how good am I, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, like it sounds like there's a, maybe I'm projecting here, but in terms of the books that you were reading and this idea of escapism through what you were reading, did you have like dreams of being a certain type of person? It's like, I want to be this type of person, and therefore I'm going to read this type of thing. It's like, oh, I aspire to be an entrepreneur, like an explorer. Are you like an armchair Indiana Jones? Have you always had this like curiosity about the outside world? Like, what is it?
The curiosity has always been the lives of others.
Okay.
So when I say that, I'll give an example. I think that the first biography I've ever read, this was maybe when I was 15, was the biography of Bill Gates. For obvious reasons, he was the richest man on the planet at that time, right?
Yeah.
But there was a particular like sentence that I think he mentioned, or maybe at that time that was mentioned a lot in the early days of the internet, right? Like the speed of thought,
Right.
is so you measure a lot of things in terms of the speed, right? Internet speeds and all of that kind of stuff. But
56K dial-up.
yeah, exactly, right? Growing up with that.
Yeah.
And what's kind of like being how should I say, under like not talked about enough, right? Was like, humans generally operate at at immense speed of thought that isn't really kind of measured well enough, right? Like and maybe in today's context, like, with the amount of AI tools out there, there's still a lot of human elements that needs to be in place for contextual work.
Yeah.
And for me, that was where my mind really wandered to, in terms of like, okay, in that early days, it's like, what are other people doing in their lives that improve their outcomes, and is that common? Is that exceptional? Is that something I can do? Is that something within my reach, beyond my reach? There was always that kind of thought process, right? Like, what can I do to get to this place that I feel like I want to, or maybe I deserve to be there, or I'm not sure. Like, I want to find out a bit more. So there was a lot of like learning through kind of relative experience, right? Like you read, you find out about something and say like, oh, this is the way this person got there.
Yeah.
How does this apply to me, right? Does it even apply to me? And am I ever gonna have that kind of opportunities? What should I do to get to that kind of opportunities? And
Do you still have that now?
I probably do.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, I probably still think in some terms like that, right? And it's really kind of like there's a escapism out of it, but there's also kind of like try to root yourself back to reality, right? Like, what is realistic, and what are the underlying reasons for why this could be measurable or realistic for me in
How
terms
do you
of
how do you
outcome.
balance that? So does this, like, okay, Bill Gates, richest man in the world at the time, and it's like, well, okay, how can I take what he's done and or doing and apply it to what I can do? So it's like you have these dreams and aspirations, but then it's like,
Yep.
well, how do I make it realistic for
So
me?
I think at least during my time running GoCo, part of the management team, what I did a lot was say no, right? no, we can't buy that. No, we can't spend on that. No, we shouldn't hire this person. No, but like that
This
was-
sounds, honestly, this sounds very familiar with dealing with anybody in finance.
yeah.
You'll know this from working in sales.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got these big... No, you can't
Yeah,
have that.
no.
What are you talking
Yeah.
about? I'm not going to
Yeah.
invest in that.
Show me the money first.
Oh my God.
But I mean, just to use it from a very personal perspective,
Yeah.
right? Like when I left GoCo and GoCo left me, right?
Yeah.
I had to then start thinking about saying yes to a lot of stuff.
That must have been a big shift.
Yes, it was a big shift. It was something that consciously that I had to kind of like say, look, all of these yeses are not all of them are going to work out.
Yeah.
Not all of them are going to be fruitful. Not all of them are going to be pleasant. Blah blah blah, right? But like it maximizes my potential chance of, finding the right connections, building up my network all over again. Because at that point in time, I mean, no disrespect, but with the way the world was, my network in travel was completely useless to me, right?
Yeah.
Like at that time, like, what was I going to start another travel company? It could be, but I just didn't have and I was kind of a bit tired from just being in the industry.
No, I mean, knowing the journey
yeah.
that you went on, no worry.
Yeah.
No. It's just like,
Yeah.
how did you do that?
So that's kind of like my thinking process in terms of like, okay, like what should I do today or now or in the next 3 to 6 months that helps me get something that I think I want or I think I need, right? Like so, and at that point in time was like, yeah, what do I was at that inflection point about kind of like what do I do
So
right now?
it sounds like you're at a bit of a crossroads. I don't know how old you were at the time, but it's like, well, I've just got to say yes to many things and go on.
Yep.
Scary?
Super scary.
Yeah.
I mean, but at the same time, some of the most interesting conversations happen around that time as well. Among Neil among many of them. But yeah, started saying yes, like a lot of random meetups, a lot of like, hey, how are you doing? Bouncing ideas. Obviously, not a lot of them worked out.
Was Neil your first foray into yeses rather than no's, by the way?
Yeah, one of those. Like
Yeah.
I was just, I mean, I think there were a few meetings, coffee chats, lunches that we had was like
Walks around the lake?
Yeah. Yes, walk around the lake was
Yeah.
kind of like. So tell me more about what's on your mind, right? Like, kind of that was kind of diving back into this curious mindset a little bit, but but it was tough to just kind of like say, I don't know what am I gonna get out of this meeting, but let's take it anyway. Let's do it. Let's buy somebody coffee.
And being in sales, you normally have an end game for a meeting, right?
Yep.
It's like, well, let's get this to a close. Let's get this to a win.
Yep.
Let's get this to a yes.
Yep.
So when you sit down and have a conversation with somebody with the outcome being nothing, it's just like, well, I'm just going to connect with somebody.
Yeah.
It can be quite daunting.
Can be quite daunting. It is.
Yeah, it's
it
like,
is.
oh, well.
Like, yeah.
And then,
yeah.
I don't know, I think I need to break out of that myself as well. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, we're just having a chat, having a catch up.
Yeah.
I live my, unlike Vin Diesel, I live my life an hour at a time.
Yep.
It's like in these hour meetings, these hour slots, and
Yeah.
I had this conversation the other day. It feels like they naturally, any conversation they have naturally comes to a close at 59 minutes. It's like living in this world of calendar slots mentally. It's like, oh my God, like how do I get out of that?
Yep.
For your curious mind, do you think you lost it along the way? Like growing up, you had like, just reading, exploring, imagining, and then all of a sudden you kind of got more into corporate life and the world, and
I think
then you
there's
back.
still that natural tendency to kind of ask what and why.
Yeah.
Right. Never mind the how, but like, why are you doing this? Like,
Yeah.
why are you doing this, Greg? Like, why are we chatting?
Oh my God. I don't have an answer for you. I'm sorry.
But I mean, whether there is a bit of, kind of corporate life setting in, like other priorities thing, for sure. Like, I think as we all grow older, we're all a bit more mindful about our time, right? There's like you kind of like
Who do I want to spend my time
yeah,
with?
who
What kind of-
exactly?
What kind of conversations do I want to
Yeah,
have?
and would you feel energized
Yeah.
after that conversation?
Well, you can give me
Yeah.
some feedback after this then.
Yeah.
We can see where we're at. Hopefully, we won't end up falling asleep. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I think how did this happen? Like, you were at some events, serendipity, you were in
Yep.
more of a yes mode than a no mode.
Yep.
You were kind of coming out of working at Endeavour, like being in normal corporate life. So I think for you, had you ever done any kind of entrepreneurial stuff on your own, like a foray into it? And then what was that like, and how did you... Was Ignition Chamber, which was before Guide, was that a combination of both of you, or was it like initially spurred on by yourself and then kind of...
Yeah. So Ignition Chamber actually started, I think, with a program. So I actually I drafted up a program, and there was a few candidates at the same time. I was freelancing, solopreneur.
What was the program for
Uh,
Ignition Chamber? Like the idea behind it?
So it was actually very centered around the positioning of it, helping early stage startup. But one thing I couldn't crack, I think we're still cracking it right now, is that how do we help very, very early stage companies that doesn't have a lot of resources to spare, but at the same time will require a lot of help. So in the market back then, I think even to a larger extent right now, it's, usually entrepreneurial development programs are in the form of accelerator or incubator.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And usually joining this program doesn't need any program fee, right? You just join as an entrepreneur. Hopefully there's a carrot at the end of the program, which is an equity round
Yep.
or a grant,
Yep.
depending on who is the benefactor of. So the challenge that we have, or Ignition Chamber had back then, is to figure out the economics behind that kind of business model.
Right.
So, but I think what is very lucky back then, we came together on a advisory consulting project by someone I know through Endeavour, was also asking for some help.
Yeah.
So those were the side advisory things that we're doing, and then we're still doing it right now because that actually pays the bill, right? A larger stage startups
So was this like a consulting thing for a particular company, and then you were pulled in from like
Yeah.
a certain... Okay.
Yeah.
Had you worked together before?
No, I think before that, no.
Okay.
So that was kind of one of the ways we kind of vetted each other, tested each other in terms
Nice.
of chemistry, in terms of like how we work with each other, and like to use another example of kind of like random guesses, right? I think we jumped on a trip to Penang one fine Thursday, I remember.
By the way, this sounds like a speed dating kind of Tinder swiping situation.
But we went to Penang to meet a company that was actually interested in like kind of this version 0 of the program that Neil was putting together. And I was like, I just want to know what does somebody who's willing to pay money for this program thinks about what we're going to do for them. Because I kind of like, what are we doing for them again? Like,
We'll figure it out when we get there.
Yeah.
So, Henry, why did you buy into the vision that he had? Because I imagined I don't imagine it was a pitch, but I imagine it was more of a story. It's like, hey, I'm thinking about this thing, and you were like, yes.
Yeah. So, for me, there was simplicity in what Neil was trying to do, right? Like, okay, these are the people I've had experience to help or work with through my Endeavour days. We're going to find more of these. They're going to love me because I'm going to spend a lot more time, create a lot more value for them. And it was like, okay, makes sense. Let's find out who these people are, right? So I think at that point, I remember this quite clearly. We had like 4 paying clients.
Hey, question for you, Alvin, on that one. Do you think if you hadn't have been in this new curious mindset again,
Yep.
you would have said yes to kind of finding out?
Maybe in real, probably I would caveat like yes, but with a lot less kind of like tolerance for like, okay, like this doesn't work, you're on your own, right?
Yeah, it's like, oh, this doesn't work. Yeah, we'll figure it out. Yeah, we'll work out a way to do this. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you know you were gonna go into the entrepreneurial journey like rather than going back into any sort of company or corporate or anything like that? We were just like, you know what, I don't need that anymore. I just want to do this thing.
Yeah, I had a bit of time and freedom, and I would say financial security, but I had like a runway,
Yeah.
right? And that kind of give me some time to really think about what I really want to do next.
Yeah.
And as I spend more time, and maybe just having that, last 9 years of like having kind of almost full control of my time,
Yeah.
like kind of jumping back into a corporate setting wasn't exactly what I was really looking forward to, right? So
Not
as much as I
inspiring.
was right, as much as like balance out, right? Like, okay, balance in my bank accounts, how filled up my calendar is, and kind of that was one of the, I guess, ways to, for me, like, okay, everything I did was to like avoid getting back into like a corporate setting, like work a 9 to 5, even as post-COVID habits have changed, it's hybrid working, so it's still
Yeah.
like, yep. It's a luxury. I fully acknowledge it's a luxury that I had, maybe because of, being a bit older and thrifty with expenses, right?
You're in finance, of course
Yeah.
you are.
Build up a bit of security in that sense,
Yeah.
but balancing everything out, it was still a question, right? We need to create value, right? And I think one of the things that we align on, and then to get into how we got together, right? I think at that early stage, we were talking to each other and we said, like, look, you're in his early 30s, I'm in my like early 40s. I just turned 40, I think, at that
Did you? When was that?
time. Last year.
Last year.
Yeah, so I was thinking 30.
Wow, all right, okay,
yeah,
4 months ago. I'll
Yeah.
give you that. When's your birthday?
July.
Dude,
Yeah.
you're not like, you didn't just turn 40. You're almost 41.
Yeah.
You need to relax. I'm almost
Yeah.
40.
No, so at the time of inflection, right?
Okay.
I was like, I was going to turn 40.
So
right?
we just had this conversation
Yeah.
before all the, it's like, okay, I want to do something. This is
Yeah.
the thing that I want to do right now. This is,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Basically, the thought process was like, if I had 3 more 10-year cycles,
Yeah.
then, well, this is like a super critical, important time, and it's supposed to be like when I fully make use of myself and my experience and my time to make like hopefully shitloads of money.
Yeah.
We told ourselves, I think there is this probably this time frame where we can be a bit patient in terms of building out what we think will create a lot of value for our clients or the people that we work with, our
Yeah.
stakeholders.
Yeah.
So so there was that kind of rooting of our in terms of like time horizon alignment, right? Because like if I was chasing like a 3-year exit, I said like let's build a business that we can sell or something like that,
Yeah.
then that might not necessarily align with how he wants to run the business. But I think that was probably one of the first conversations that we had, like are we aligning in terms of like how we're going to build this, because we're obviously not able to throw bucket loads of money into this problem as well, right?
Right.
Like we're not going to hire a team, we need to find and build this organically. That means spending a lot of time on our side to look for clients, to service them, work with them, build out programs as well. Plus also kind of testing out who should we actually sell to, right? We've talked to government agencies, we've talked to corporates, we talked to VCs,
I remember all
yeah.
these conversations. I remember, yeah.
Right. So, do we actually have that patience to do all of these?
Right.
Right. And to some extent, we're still doing some of these things, but I think like we've narrowed down a lot of the focus, a lot of like who we think we are actually going to be helpful for.
Yeah.
But that took some time. That took quite a bit of time actually.
But you mentioned it's kind of still a work in progress as you kind of figure it out along the way. Just kind of to come into yourself, were you looking for a partner / co-founder, number one? And number two, what do you see in this big boy over here? And like, actually, you know what? This is something I want to do with this guy.
Definitely not. Looking for a co-founder wasn't intentional. I think prior to this, there were conversations that was leading towards a co-founding team, but then I was the only one sort of like push this through by myself. Then that's where I found Alvin along this journey.
Yeah.
Somebody's like truly in sync. I think with the pace of things
Right.
and how both of our capabilities will complement each other.
When you say
Yeah.
pace,
Yeah.
this could go either way, right? So in startup world, it's like we need somebody that can run really fast and do it all at once and blah blah blah. Come back to what Alvin mentioned in terms of maybe having a bit more patience, thinking in 10-year cycles rather than 3-month sprints kind of thing. What was it about the pace? Was it a combination of the two? When to speed up, when to slow down? Was it the patience angle? What did you kind of see as like, oh, this could work for as a founding team?
I think definitely there are, like, other than the program itself, when I was testing the very first version of the program, that got a little bit of leads, and there are things that actually we can do actually, and there are also other side projects that we got from SMEs, and that gave us a lot of opportunity to know each other by doing these kind of projects, ad hoc projects. I think through that we were able to sync up with what we can cover on a service basis, like consulting side. Also the more finance, more capital related, is more on Alvin's side, and operational stuff, marketing stuff is on my part, and we all come together on organizational development related stuff, right? It fulfills a bit of that value chain or value package for the consulting work. And I think then through that we then understood that, hey, there is part of the business that is revenue generating. We can pay our bills, right? There is another part of business which require more experimentation. So it buys time. To be honest, if we don't get any of this consulting project that will pay our bills, I don't think the program itself will sustain the business, because like until today we're still testing out the economics of running a program without governmental or this kind of a donor type intervention. So that is something that, if I think then going back to why it is so aligned and the power of that synergy, what is truly untapped is if we able to figure out that model, it would give us a lot of sort of a hockey stick, or rather a proportional big value return, because we are able to put a model where we scale ourselves. We kind of know where that comes from. It comes from us also empowering others with our knowledge, with our skill set. And also why we are here today, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is the model. It's just that what kind of format and structure, and that is always been changing, modifying ever since 2021 until today. I think we're getting very, very close to that.
So the first iteration of like Ignition Chamber. So what was it, and how has it progressed so far? And like, I think in line with that, how are you thinking about commercialization and?
Yeah.
Because I think there's a fine balance here between, okay, we need to make money so we can actually grow and help more people.
Yep.
But we can't make so much money at the expense of omitting a lot of these kind of early stage founders that deserve a kind of chance or whatever it is. So do you want to? That's like a 9-part question, but maybe start with the first one in terms of what was the program? Like, what was it designed for through Ignition Chamber, and then how's it kind of morphed into what Guide is now?
Yeah, maybe I can give you like a 3-phase type iteration. So the first,
sell me, pitch me on it. Come on, baby.
The first phase, which is
check.
the first version of it. That's why we traveled to Penang for that. It's a very simple model, and it's a very traditional, I think, a conventional model where we. There is a VC. There is a bit of alliance. So Guide partner is that VC. They say that hey, if Neil, if you guys can behave like a scout, probably we can be your investment partner, right? So that is the typical model. A lot of VC out there is running with a program. Like YCOM is the same, so there's always somebody who cut the check.
Right.
But what we didn't have back then, because we weren't part of Gobi Partners, right? So we didn't have the commanding say into who actually get the capital. So ended up we charge a program fee.
Right.
So it's a very nominal program fee, shy 2K. Yeah. So
what currency?
ringgit.
Ringgit.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I think for those who, I think we can really see for those who actually join us. I know we're giving a bit of leeway for them to pay us. In a way of different payment structure, different terms. You don't have to pay it upfront, things like that.
I'm seeing a pattern here.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you can pay if you want.
So it's a way for us to collect more insights and truly know the needs and the wants or the help that the other the founders will actually require. So
it's basically paying for information in a roundabout way. It's like, okay, well, the more insights we can actually get, the faster we can actually grow the business, and it's kind of a self-perpetuating thing.
Correct.
It's difficult to, what's the best way to put this? It's a balance between doing that and actually getting people to pay money so you can sustain the actual business and the growth of the business as well.
Yes.
How did you manage that? Like that kind of balance?
I think that's where the first program it was a very short-lived program.
Right.
Then quickly we realized that, hey, the main bucket is still the revenue comes from advisory work.
Right.
So that's where we decided so we're getting more and more consulting work actually. And because of that, running a program requires a lot of operational, account management that is not necessarily fruitful in terms of generating income. So we took a little bit of pause. And because the consulting work is getting more and more, we decided, hey, we got to find ways to replicate ourselves. That's why we actually started the Chief of Staff School.
I remember that.
Yes.
Just a quick one on just for like clarity in terms of the program that was run through Ignition. What was the actual program, maybe at a high level? Was it like a 3-month program, like this many modules, these modules covered this, and like what was the outcome that you were looking to get for like the people that would sign up for the program?
So back then there were a few classes that we run.
Right.
Yes, it's roughly about 10-week program. I think back then it's called Foundry.
Foundry.
Yeah, it's a Foundry program. So in a way it's actually incubator.
Right.
Yeah. And through the 10-week experience, we run check-ins to understand each and every account or startup needs. And that's why I think we decided to travel to Penang and I think this particular startup was doing more of an agri-tech type solution for farmers in Malaysia. So we have to see it in our own eyes. And so this particular entrepreneur came from agriculture distribution business. So he is actually disrupting his own business by building a tech component to it.
Right.
So we have to see ourselves, right? How serious this entrepreneur is, and then how we can actually help. Yeah. So that's this one case. One of the few cases that we actually attended to.
So the 10-week program, was it like week 1 you'll go through so in my mind here's where I'm making some assumptions, like, okay, week 1 in operations, this is how like
so it's like sales, marketing, operations, a bit of finance,
a bit of fight, but it was there just like show me a spreadsheet, like.
No, there's definitely a lot of validation in terms of the GTM, the go-to-market, and then how that ties in with the product maturity, how much money they have left in the bank, what was the founders going to invest in this, how much time do they actually put into this vis-a-vis maybe some of them still had jobs, some of them were running other businesses, right? So it was, I think, like, if there was like a singular thing after 10 weeks, right, it was more like a diagnosis. In our minds, it was kind of like a diagnosis of whether this company can raise capital for it to pursue the dreams that it wants, right? One, or the other thing would be then, the founders actually need to bootstrap this and spend more money, do some R&D, get more clients, get more products before they can reach the next level of scale. I think ultimately those were probably the two main buckets of companies, or kind of like where the 10-week process, after going through, okay, this is your product, or these are the guys that you have in the team, this is the sales that you're doing, right? After 10 weeks, in fact, probably in most cases a lot earlier.
Right.
Like, okay, if you want to raise this amount of capital, this is what you need to do.
Okay.
Right?
So it's like an audit / diagnosis and
it's actually more done as a diagnostic.
Nice.
Yeah. Obviously, not a lot of people are going to pay for that, even as it's kind of needed. But we realized then that was kind of like where I'd say in terms of that common sense bar needs to be raised, right? Like raising for a lot of people, raising external capital, whether it's VC or not, right? You're in the minority. It's not normal, right? Think about all the businesses that are around, like how many of them actually raise external capital versus actually using their own money to run the business or to build the business, right? Like
what's the maths on that? Either debt, PE, VC, angels,
family, friends, that kind of stuff.
Have you got like the ratios? And putting you on the spot here in terms of okay, because you said it's not kind of normal. So,
I mean, at the most extent, like if you say VC numbers, then you're talking like low single digit percentages, right?
Oh,
like,
really?
Yeah. I mean, the odds of raising VC money here, probably in the region and globally, it's definitely low single digits.
I mean, just a bit of a sidebar on this one. Did you see that it was an article that came out, whatever, and I can't remember which was the VC term sheet. Have you read about this? Like the really unfavorable terms. It's like, I have you seen the term sheet? I haven't seen the term sheet.
I've not seen the term sheet. And I think that's a hook from Tech in Asia to get more people to, you want to see that term sheet, you're going to pay us, right? Like,
the way to pay or whatever it is, they've done a good job because there's been a lot kind of said about it. So it's an interesting balance. I'm talking about balance a lot already. The maturity of like the startups that are coming through, and like you said, the knowledge that as well from the startups, it's not normal to go out and raise VC money. It might seem normal based on what's pushed in the press, but it's really not. This is what's actually required to raise money. So you've got that side of things, the maturity and the level of knowledge around that from the startups. Then on the other side, you've got the level of knowledge and maturity from the VCs that are here in terms of what's actually expected, in terms of it's, I read your poster down there in terms of the venture backed, but not necessarily de-risked, but reducing risk based on like what Guide can actually bring. So it's kind of like this double-edged sword between the maturity levels of both the companies and also the investors.
Something I want to share as well related to our first vision. I think towards the end of our program, we actually did refund. So because there's nothing substantial we can do through a few of them,
right,
out of the 4 or 5 that we gotten in. So like what you mentioned, like it's going through a realization process, calibrating the understanding about, going,
could you tilt you can rotate the mic, there you go.
All right, I think after the teaching, the assessments and the conversation we had, and what we realized that, hey, some of them actually we collected the money already, and then we actually decided to refund them because there's nothing substantial we can do and we can put onto the table and said, hey, I'll help you to build that. And that actually turns into a lot of interesting insights and conversations. Some of them want us to be part of their team. Right. So that's a great validation of what we can actually offer. But I think then it becomes a co-founding journey. Yeah,
it's less about the program the value brings, the value the program brings, more about what you guys is. And I suppose this is where the insights came from. Say, well, how do you replicate yourselves?
Yes,
which
correct.
Is okay.
Yeah, that's where we decided, hey, we've come to the point of a fair amount of understanding that, hey, there are a lot of people that require our help. We know our skill set would help them, but how do we duplicate ourselves?
Right. And
I think somehow, I think during that time, the point of time, US is going through, I think a trending of chief of staff as the all-rounded strategic person that will support the founder.
Right.
And then we thought of, hey, this generalist but also strategic may come from a very certain functional background, but have climbed themselves towards a cross-disciplinary person. It sounds like our experience back then.
Right.
So even though we wear certain titles, certain functional titles, but we're actually doing a lot of other stuff as well, right? And we became a trusted person to the founder. A lot of things that would say in closed door, they're really trusted in doing certain things out from our original job description and scope of work.
Yeah.
So then we latched on that title. Then we decided, hey, let's try this out. We reached out to somebody in the States that is also advocating for her because she was actually a former chief of staff for a few venture-backed company. So she left a her workplace and started her own recruitment agency. We cold messaged her on LinkedIn.
Of course you did.
And I pitched a program. It was like, hey, Chief of Staff's Academy.
Yeah.
Right, she latched on it, and that's where we started a program, and we ran for I think 2 cohorts.
We
Yeah.
did 2 cohorts. Was
Yeah.
this still under Ignition Chamber or
This
at
was
the-
still under ignition.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you ran 2 cohorts. How many groups or people per cohort?
30.
Yeah.
Yeah, 30 people per cohort.
30 people
Yeah.
per cohort. Oh damn.
Yeah, most of them came from the States.
Yeah, half from the States and then half from other parts of the world.
Oh damn.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So there's 60 in total.
Yep.
60,
Yes.
okay. So for the program that was run for chief of staff, was it similar? 10-week program, or was it like a 3-month thing, 1-week thing? Like how did it look?
It was a 6-week program.
Yep.
6-week program
Mm.
with career coaching, assignment to do capstone project that we introduced
Right.
in order to speed up their talent placement. So I think part of it, the program is marketed towards towards aspiring chief of staffs, current chief of staffs, people who are going through pivotal career journey that I wanted to step closer to the C-suite.
Right.
And also for people that that didn't actually get recognized from doing a lot of
Yeah.
work, especially from an EA, PA background.
Right,
But
okay.
they're doing a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Just
understood.
So Chief of Staff was a great platform for these individuals to grow beyond their comfort zone. So actually quite a few of them landed the Chief of Staff role for a few startup companies.
Was that the goal? Was it? So it was kind of a partnership with this recruitment firm.
Yes.
They come through your program. They get like, I don't know, say certification or
Yes.
accreditation. And
Yes.
it's like, okay, now you can go forth and
Correct.
get
Yeah.
a role.
Yeah.
Mm.
There was obviously the placement that
Mm.
Yeah.
benefits the recruitment side of things.
Right.
We never really replicated that here because I think the kind of recruitment process for a chief of staff here wasn't still yet, and probably still is a very closed role. It's not something that is kind of like properly thought about, advertised.
I
and-
actually
yeah.
haven't seen it.
But we do notice it being more prevalent and in 2 very different tangents of cohorts, right? Like there's a bunch of like MNCs that based out of Singapore that has like a managing director who's either MD of APAC or Southeast Asia that then needs a one down that is like either a CEO's office or a chief of staff,
Right.
right? And then there is then some early stage startups that are like pre-series A, series A, where they're not rich enough yet to hire a full C-suite team, but need somebody to kick ass all across the board, right?
How's it different from a general manager?
Okay, so that's a really good question, right? Like in our minds, a GM
Yeah.
holds P&L responsibilities.
Right.
Same like a COO, right? A COO would be in charge of how smooth operations are. If they're in the absence of a revenue lead person, right? The COO also then holds responsibilities for top line growth.
Okay.
A chief of staff doesn't hold P&L responsibilities, but is basically the confidant of the CEO to make sure that his or her priorities gets executed at the ground level, right? So whether this is a fundraising project, whether this is like a new market expansion project, whether this is a systems migration project, you're elevating yourself from Excel sheets into like a SAP or Oracle or
You
even
love it.
Xero, right?
You love Excel.
Yeah.
You do.
So then there needs to be trust that this person who is not the CEO will be the one driving a lot of these key initiatives that drives business objectives, right?
So it's like the voice of the CEO and the
Yep.
CEO is in the room.
Yeah, but without necessarily, and I think like the main distinction with the GM is that they don't carry the P&L responsibilities.
Right.
In a lot of like early stage startup cases that we've seen, maybe more so in the US, is that kind of like fixing, and this might be something you're familiar with, right? Fixing that dynamic between product technology versus marketing and sales, right? Like whose voice is louder? It's like, no, both of you have to listen to me, right? Like,
I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. But
My heart rate
that's
is 158. Yeah.
But that's a very common thing, right?
Mm.
Like to make sure that both voices are aligned and setting up that tone, especially in the absence of like VP level leadership on sales or on the product side, and the CEO has kind of like needs tabs on both, but don't really fully understand everything that's needed to be done well on the product side or on the sales and marketing side. Then you have a chief of staff to kind of like bang heads together, come up with a plan, make the CEO listen to the plan as well,
Right.
and then execute on it. Right. So that's
It's an interesting bridge, hey, because
Yeah.
obviously normally if you've got like a CRO or chief sales
Yep.
officer, COO, they have their agenda,
Yep.
Yes.
whereas the chief of staff agenda is what's
Yeah.
best for the business.
Yep.
Like how do we? So then you can then.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a tough job, eh?
It's a
Like,
really tough job. Yeah.
But then how do you hire externally for that? Like that confidant to the CEO, that must be really hard.
So I think that's where when we think about like talent maturity levels in Southeast Asia,
Yeah.
I think it makes more sense for internal progression.
Yeah, yeah,
So you need to find like that good base of like your early employees, right? And one of them is going to graduate into filling up a role like this as you grow,
yeah, yeah.
right? As the business becomes more complex, right? You want somebody internally who kind of like understands the way the organization works rather than being parachuted in, spend 100 days just to learn how the organization works, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's kind of a bit of that local context of roles being progressed in
Like-
that stage. Yeah.
Well, especially here in Asia,
Yeah.
it's a lot of relationship based, right?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like, well, how do you build that trust? Like 100 days isn't going to be enough to learn everything about
No,
industry, company,
Yeah.
internal operations, politics, and then also the person that you're
Yeah.
supposed to be advocating for, which is the CEO.
So
Wow.
in what we've seen a lot of, like just contrasting what we've seen in terms of this role from the States
Yeah.
versus here, I think here you find that a lot of people who fill up these kind of roles are either ex-consultants, ex-bankers,
Right.
because the main chunk of the work that needs to be done is mostly from a corporate development perspective, fundraising, a lot of like business intelligence side. So it's very numbers driven plus internal projects,
Yeah.
right? Whereas a lot of like in terms of like people who graduate into chief of staff roles in the US, like either have some kind of growth experience before, so either on the product side or on the
Right.
sales side,
Right.
and then potentially coming through from even a HR perspective, where they have kind of like seen just massive internal growth of people from
Yeah.
hiring to onboarding processes, and just this kind of like this hand that kind of like moves people around on behalf of like the management team or the CEO to make sure like, okay, these are the people that we've hired to do X,
Yep.
and X will be done, right?
Right.
So it's very different, contrasting kind of like progression in terms of the types of talent and just the availability of these talents as well.
I've always
Yeah.
been curious about like, this is a separate topic,
Yeah.
the importance of HR and talent development, and how, I mean, they're the gatekeepers for the culture essentially. Well, who comes through, who gets interviewed, like where they come from, because they're the people that are put in front of the
Yeah.
hiring committee or hiring teams. It's like, HR is such an important role within an organization,
Yeah.
but then
Yeah.
it doesn't seem to be
Yeah.
perceived as an important role. But again, I'm sure you got
Yeah.
some comments on that.
I'm
But-
I'm a bit conflicted about
Yeah.
that in a sense, right? Like, one is that there's, for a while now, there's been a lot of clamor for CHROs,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that HR should get a seat at the table of the C-suite. I think that probably rings true for a lot of large multinational organizations. I think for HR, for a growth company, it's the responsibility of all the managers. That you kind of like work in smaller teams,
Yep.
right? And obviously there needs to be leadership around that as well. But what I'm trying to say is that every manager in a smaller team contributes a lot to the culture building of it.
Yes.
Plus, then what do you who do you let in, and what do you let go of, right? Like, who do you let in, and what are the kind of like
parameters
good stuff
for promoting, and then also
Yes.
those that need to be maybe managed out of an organization.
And
So I'm with you on this one. I think there's a lot of responsibility on the shoulders of the direct managers. There is a however there, which is more around like, okay, new HR best practices, new talent development programs, new ideas like that. I think it's a bit more like a matrix, right? With a like, so for example, if we were sat here, we've got the CEO, like sales, and then HR. You'd be saying to me, hey, did you know that this thing is happening within like the HR talent development? Like, this is what you want to be thinking about with your team. I know you're like fully hands-on, one-to-ones development, rather than this person needs to go on a PIP. Here's a checkbox for this. It's like, talk to me about like how I can really develop my people in a new way. I just see it as truly as a partnership, because obviously you have a responsibility as a manager for like the growth of the team, but then also a KPI for a certain number, whether it's productivity or the actual product or sales. You're going to miss some of the talent development stuff, which you can actually get from like maybe a HR business partner, as they call it. But I don't know. I don't know how it's actually viewed.
Yeah, maybe
sure.
unpopular opinion here, right? Like, I think for a long time, I think HR's main responsibility is to ensure that the company does not get sued, right?
Is there a paper trail?
Yeah, and I think to a certain extent there's truth in that. But what I want to say is that the loyalty in terms of HR's roles and objectives, that should be loyal to the business and not to any individual or department. And I say this also in the context of separating the entrepreneurs from the business, right? Separate entities. You learn this in like Finance 101, right? Like the owner of the company thinks that they're also the company, and that does not always ring true, right? In the HR case, I think there's an argument for like, you need to do what's right for the company, not for any particular individual.
Right.
Right.
But aren't they the same?
I use the same analogy for from a fundraising point of view as well, right? Like, if you're an entrepreneur, you want your company to be worth billions from day one.
Right.
Does that help the company grow? It doesn't, right? Okay, if you're going to raise $1,000 at $1 billion valuation, you feel great about it.
Right.
Does the $1,000 help?
Right.
Does it help in that fundraising process? It doesn't, right? So that's kind of how I would draw that separation of like what's good for the business or what's good for the entrepreneur, right? Whether from an ego perspective or whatever that is, that incentive must be 100% aligned with the business.
Right.
Right? They're not always the same.
Okay, I would agree. I
Yeah.
would agree on
Yeah.
that one. I would agree on that one.
Yeah.
So I think God, we could go off on a tangent on that.
Yeah.
So I really want to explore that the whole HR side of things and talent development and how, I mean, a company is full of people.
Yeah.
Right? The people build the company and whatever. But I will get your thoughts on that another time. However, ignition chamber, chief of staff, 60 people. What happened after that? So the cohorts came through, 6 weeks program for each of those. Like, okay, well, how did it then evolve? What happened next?
So I think the kind of short summary was, in terms of keeping up with the cohorts, I think like what we shared before, like 50% of the people came from the US, 50%. I think there was kind of like an internal point of view where it probably makes a lot more sense to split the cohorts out and build out a Southeast Asia based cohort versus something that is more US, Europe centric, And I think at that point was kind of like it was a bit of like a priority shift as well from our other partner who was running her recruitment side of things. I think
Yeah.
she wanted to double down on the recruitment business. I mean, we worked very closely with her in terms of building up the program. But in effect, she was kind of like one of the key instructors as well,
Right.
and kind of like quality assurance
Right,
side
okay.
of things. Like, while we feel like we've both played the role somewhat, I don't think, to a certain extent, we've ever carried that title as a chief. I feel like I've grown out of just being a finance person while I was
Yeah.
at GoCom. I was like doing a lot of different kind of things, except code, right?
Can you?
No,
Okay.
I can start to like read a bit of logic with ChatGPT's help.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so in that sense, then to a certain extent, we were asking ourselves, like, were we confident enough to kind of carry this into like a full-blown chief of staff school academy plus community building plus recruitment services and so on? Because I think to run it profitably and sustainably, that it needs all these different components.
Right.
We had a long thought about it, and I think it's still on the it's been put on the shelves.
Yeah.
Right. It may make a return, and at this point in time, we're thinking about how that kind of feeds into whatever we're doing on like the guide programs, right? Like, turn away from the chief of staff as a role into what's kind of like the expectations of a role working in a startup, right? So in terms
Please
of
elaborate.
yeah, so in terms of like thinking of what the program will be like for a singular role, which is the chief of staff role,
Yeah.
is then to like dissect down into what it means for people who are working at different stages of different startups,
Right.
right? So kind of like we thought that might actually be a better way of building a course / program rather than to focus on a niche kind of
Chief of staff,
chief of
yeah.
staff title.
So is that where the kind of pin was put in Ignition Chamber and then it kind of evolved into
Yes.
Guide? Is that what
Yeah.
happened? So conversation between you guys were like, actually, chief of staff, it was good outcomes, but it's not how we see kind of really adding value based on obviously the conversations we have from an entrepreneurial point of view, what you want to give back to kind of startups and everything. So how was Guide born from that?
So what was happening as we were running consulting projects and running the Chief of Staff School, there was a lot of conversation with VCs,
Right.
investors.
You mentioned Gobi was one, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the VCs in Malaysia or Southeast Asia is going through transformation, forced transformation after the tech bubble burst,
Yep.
right? They, I think that's where VC as an investment firm start to look into value creation quite a lot and very seriously right now.
Right.
Figuring themselves couldn't be just a capital provider, but also it needs to be also operationally capable in offering more guidance
Right.
to their portfolio companies at the start. So that's where I think there's a lot of conversation in coming to an alliance, independently and neutral, to not just to serve Gobi's portfolio, but also any other I think equity investors across the region. And how do we, in order for us to not because the bubble burst, because everybody has struggled, Southeast Asia is significantly have reduced innovation, risky capital coming into the system. So there was a bit of that shake-up in terms of the industry, and obviously we are one of the players, right? If startups wouldn't able to survive, if there's a lack of startup supply, that means the industry is going to be slow, and then everybody's go back to traditional ways of doing business. That's not what we want. It's bad for economy. So The alliance formed on the understanding that, hey, there are formal operators like ourselves, and there's a bunch of, like yourself, Greg, and a bunch of people. How do we come together and continue drive this ecosystem, this industry upwards? So I think that's where the Guide came about through a partnership with Gobi Partners, but at the same time, we came to an understanding that, hey, we also need to serve, we are on a larger mission to serve the entire industry, not just for a very particular investors, because ultimately it will benefit everyone.
Yeah.
When it benefits the entrepreneur, so I think we have always this saying, right? If an entrepreneur wins, everybody on the cap table will win. So I think that is a philosophical change in the way of, hey, back then I think it was a very, it was always, investor bullying the founder, when they exit, they don't get any money out of it. Right?
I don't, maybe I think I'm a bit too naive, to be honest. Why was that actually the case? Because I've seen other term sheets as well, like from years ago, that basically they was stiffing the founders, right? It's like the investors were asking for all these kind of like guarantees, like capital guarantees, even personal guarantees and all this kind of stuff. It's like, all right, but you're really just kind of stifling any sort of growth. You're shafting the founder. Obviously, they're going to be scared to make any sort of bets that might be beneficial for like the entire company and the investors, because there's so much on the line. Yeah,
I think it has to do with, I think early investors here in this part of the world are leveraging a lot on information asymmetry. So because they know certain, how, they can work their way out financially in order to always have the winning side of the deal.
Right.
And founders here, especially tech founders, we were just so new into Silicon Valley type, VC investment. There's a new fancy investment that invests in only tech. And you'll be celebrating jumping off your chair whenever there's a term sheet in front of you, and you don't care about the implication of all this. So I think it's just a lack of knowledge. There weren't any enough open source knowledge that's available to actually support entrepreneurs,
right.
And hence the bullying might happen.
Okay.
I think that's where the paradigm shift very fast after the bubble has burst. Now we see less of a gap between knowledge on the entrepreneurial level, and also that's what we try to push up as well, together with what the investor themselves can actually making money together with the founders.
Could you elaborate more on the bubble bursting in the VC world?
Alvin, do you want to add more?
I mean,
what happened? When was it? What were the implications?
There's several factors to the whole thing, right? Like, one is, I think there was obviously a bit of a delayed reaction to a lot of the tech funding winter that came out of the US, right? And then also, as kind of money supply dried up, you get into this position where VCs also need to hedge their bets, right? They have kind of like, the money was still available, right? Just that the growth conditions for startups to win in a certain time frame became a lot more uncertain, right?
Okay.
And
what caused the tech winter coming out of?
There was a bit of after COVID, interest rates went up. There was the kind of like the very beginning of an early trade war with China. So a lot of these kind of uncertain factors, and also just people not really understanding what a lot of consumer behavior was going to be like post-COVID, right? And I think by and large, maybe I don't have like specific numbers, but what I feel like is that, there's a lot of spending patterns that have changed, right? There's a lot of short-term spending on kind of like short-term gratifying expenses, as opposed to a lot more like longer-term savings and longer-term purchases and expenses. So like if you think about what has happened to in terms of like property sale market, I think that a lot of property agents will tell you like that like last 2 years have been really good as well, and it's a function of different countries and different markets. But if you think about where a lot of that money is being spent now, there's a lot of going into retail. You're seeing a lot of like older generations actually taking their money out and spending more now than they have, right? Like luxury goods spend has gone up, luxury car spend has gone up, right?
Has
a lot
it?
of yeah, it has.
What have
In
you
general,
been buying?
I haven't been buying anything.
Are you sure? What was that car I saw in the parking lot?
That's a really old car. If you if you notice the model, yeah, it's gonna be taxed soon, I think. But yeah, but to kind of like pinpoint, like, is there like a singular factor that has made capital seem more expensive? Like ultimately, if you think about how hard is it for VCs to raise their own capital, and how that market has changed between the dynamics of the VCs and the LPs, that's kind of like the trickle down effect.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a bit of a counter there as well, right? It's weird
Yeah.
because if the older generation are pulling more money out to spend on luxury items, that what they just weren't wanting to
Yep.
invest in.
Yeah, so I think personally I see a bit of like I wouldn't say comeback. I think direct to consumer companies has always been there, with a certain niche market, and kind of like new rules around distribution, right? Like whether through TikTok and social media and so on. But I think there is like a group of direct to consumer companies that are coming out in this singular large markets, right? Out of the Philippines, out of Indonesia, out of Vietnam. Maybe we haven't seen as much of these like in Malaysia, but I think I could pinpoint to a few, right? I think there are certain smaller niches, like pet food as a category. I think that's one of like
Really?
quick growing. We've seen like
Why is that?
with people just generally not wanting to have kids and then replacing them with fur kids.
I've heard about this. There's like
Yeah.
there was a shift in terms
Yeah.
of those that used to have kids now have like pets.
Yep.
And like kids are seen as the most exotic pet you can
Yes,
actually
exactly.
have, and the most expensive, that only for the
Yeah.
ultra high net worth.
Yeah.
It's like,
So I mean,
interesting.
the in the little that we've seen, so domestic consumption, I think that's a really good key theme around like where consumers are spending money, right? And a lot of businesses are probably going to come up in enabling the domestic consumption and the infrastructure around it. So fintech has always been kind of like key to ensuring that domestic consumption is as easy as it gets, right? So payment systems,
Yeah.
credits, and that kind of stuff.
When was the last time you used cash to buy anything?
No. So
Yeah, right.
I had this problem where my daughter came to me for the last 3 days asking me for 10 ringgit, and I say like, oh, okay, I'll get it changed, and then I never got it changed. Like I have a 100 note in my wallet that I've not touched and spent.
I've got a 100 ringgit note in my wallet for some reason, and I
Yeah.
don't know where it came from.
Yeah, and for me to break a 10 to give to my daughter, that becomes an issue now, right? I have to go down to the store and spend money on something to get changed, right? Because I can't even go to the ATM and ask for 10 ringgit notes now. Right?
What? You got what?
Yeah, it usually comes out in 50s and 100s.
All right, wealthy.
Yeah.
Because that was just when you're going to go and like buy your fancy cars, like only buying cash,
Yeah.
never on credit, so whatever. That's interesting. Yeah, I can't remember the last time I used cash.
Yeah.
So just in terms of like the types of startups you're seeing, then is that what you're seeing through the Guide program? Obviously, it's kind of a talking point here, but is that what you're seeing for the startups that are coming through? You seeing more B2C, direct to consumer? Like, what are you seeing?
Like as the spending goes towards there, then there are obviously the front facing to consumer companies, right? The direct to consumer goods.
Yeah.
But then there is also then an entire infrastructure that enables that. So I think like logistics, fintech, I think are kind of like the two key pillars, I guess, for consumer spending. Yeah, I think we've seen like healthcare. I think like startups in and around like the healthcare businesses.
Are we talking like telehealth
Yeah,
kind of thing?
from
or-
insurance to
Yeah.
telehealth to like some early stage diagnostics. I think that's coming a lot more out.
Where does Guide sit then in this whole kind of ecosystem of startups, partners, alliances, and all this? I mean, do you seek like these startups to go through the program? Like, how's it? Talk to me. Tell me how it works. Like, if I'm a startup, which I'm not, like, how do I leverage Guide?
Okay, I think in our current mode, right? Like one of the things that we're doing is, I think Neil's been pretty busy in terms of building out that content library, and I think like to kind of like to sum up a lot of like the journey that we've shared
Yeah.
until now, we're on this, I'd say, mission to make common sense more available, right?
That seems like oxymoronic. It's like, because by and large, common sense
Yep.
should be
So-
that. So how do you? Okay.
Exactly, right? Like so,
Okay.
so like some of the kind of lessons that we've learned through doing the work of the diagnostics with a subset of companies, running the kind of Guide Founders program
Yeah.
over the last two cohorts. Our experience from a chief of staff school is that there is kind of like an unbalanced, I would say, knowledge gap, right? Like just the way people think about incentives, the way people think about expectations in terms
So
of
the knowledge of who? You said there's like a bit of a knowledge gap. It's like, well, between who and who?
actually,
Maybe I can.
yeah.
So what we realized, I think because three of us, we have been, I think for the last 5 to 10 years, we have been in a very digital driven business.
Right.
But the larger extent of the SME doesn't operate that way. So when we gotten a bunch of people like startup new founders, first time founders, even SME experienced founders coming into our program, what we realized through the series of assessment, the conversation we had with them, the people actually going through our program, something as fundamental as doing data driven decision making is something very, very new to them. Right. So what I'm trying to point out here is that to most of the SME population, the larger extent of the world, or in Asia or in Malaysia, are still very traditional in a way. They're relying on paper and pen and intuition to risk themselves in building an entrepreneurial career.
Right.
Without guys like us are very familiar with spreadsheet, Google Analytics,
Careful.
right?
I've seen a spreadsheet. don't ask me to do anything with one.
Yeah. So collecting data, collecting feedbacks, using
Right.
insights to make calculated risk. It's only known to a very small pool of people.
I think I can't remember how to word it, but yeah, because you're in it so much, it's like, well, this is just the norm,
yeah,
right?
correct. It's muscle memory for us, right? But not for a lot of people. Not for all the people that has, like what you said earlier, right? A lot of people got welcomed or exposed to the concept of startup venture business.
Yeah.
It's actually through media, but media didn't actually educate them about it. But they only celebrate big wins, big fundraising money. So they come to us with a lot of bias, a lot of misunderstanding
Right.
of, hey, if I got a great dag, can you give me money? But it doesn't work that way, bro.
Right.
There's so many things goes underneath the thought process, the preparation of a data room and things like that. So what we realized through all this conversation, we realized that, hey, fundamentally there's a huge knowledge gap. So that is common sense to us, but it's not common sense to them. And that's where we want to democratize. Yeah, through venture education. That's how we want to repackage and restructure for something we're going to launch called Learning Pass.
learning paths.
Yeah, because we used to, when we run Guide Founders Program, it is still run through a cohort basis mechanism,
Right.
which is still heavily relying on account management, meaning there's X amount of expectation of sign-ups coming through a cohort. Me and Alvin will spend time with them, we'll actually teach them live instructor-led sessions.
Got it.
Right, go through that 3 months program, and then we extended 9 months, so it's a 12 months program, and 9 months of account management,
Right.
BD support,
Yeah.
just to adjust some of their working habits
Yeah.
from their previous workplace or the previous SME business that they actually run before.
Okay.
So the previous 2 Guide Founders program only selects people who have domain knowledge and a bit of a P&L experience.
Right.
So we were able to sort of map out that there are core competencies that make somebody running a less of a risky business than somebody who just dream of becoming an entrepreneur, first day out of the school, and risking themselves into this career journey without knowing anything out of it.
Right.
So we were, in a way, having this new version, a new phase of Guide or Initiation Chamber, where we are more clearer about who may most likely make it. If not, they're able to stabilize the business as a sustainable business model, just that they couldn't scale. So then through that 1 year, which is the entire last year, 2024, there are 2 versions of 2 cohorts of founders. We have a dozen of founders, came from very different verticals, and most of them are actually B2B. And if there's a B2C component, it is always B2B2C.
For these founders that you've been speaking to, how did they find you, or did you find them? Like, what was?
They were recommended. So the program itself is set up in a way that they have to be nominated and recommended
By
either their angel investors, their advisors, the consultant, the mentors, their former colleagues. For investors, they may or may not invested in them.
Right.
Then we'll ask them a series of questions that, hey, if you recommend this particular entrepreneur, how do you know them? And what are some of the things you think Guide can actually help them, right? And then for the applicant side, we ask them. We don't make a judgment on their business idea. I think the market itself is the most objective judgment on their business idea, whether they're successful or not. So what we essentially look for is that this person's functional background. That's 1. 2, why do they want to become an entrepreneur? I think the motivation and the reason.
Right.
And why do they actually think they can be an entrepreneur?
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a very 2 different side of the question.
Are they already running like a business or already got an idea that's in early inception?
That's a mix.
So one of the reasons I asked you, there's a company, you're probably familiar with Entrepreneur First. You've heard about these. So I remember back in the day, they would do a lot of outreach to very skilled individuals in the like PhD holders or whatever, like domain knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And they would reach out and be like, "Hey, entrepreneurship, what are your thoughts?" And then they would actually come on board. I think it's a little bit like Antler cohorts and stuff like that, right? Where do you sit?
I think first of all, there's about I think yes, there is a similarity in terms of profile screening, if you were to call it.
Yeah.
But we do not offer we don't speed up, or we don't offer co-founder journey searching. So because the reason why we believe you don't have to rush into searching a founder within the program, the period of the program, is that honestly, there's a lot of things you can actually do it yourself, and you should be doing yourself. So we believe quite a lot in holistic development, skill set development, or competency. So for example, say I'm a tech guy. I know how to build a product. I'm a domain expert in healthcare AI, right? So I know how to code. I know about healthcare. But I do not know anything about capital and finance. I do not know anything about sales and marketing. When I join this program, what I'm expecting out of it is to hone some of my basic understanding about sales and marketing for a startup.
Right.
And capital and finance available to me, and what are my options, so I can deliver a product that the market wants. Whereas for a sales and marketing centric individual, they do not have coding experience, they do know how to build a product from scratch, they may need the other two domain, right?
Right.
So that's where the program is setting them up with a level playing field in terms of a competency.
Okay.
2
So,
or 3 months. Yeah.
for someone like me, if I join a program, right? God, it sounds like we're going through a bit of a pitch. Like, so it's like, hey, buy this thing. I'm just I'm just trying to kind of formulate this idea in my head. It's like, okay, well, I've got this business, and I go through the program. Now I have some sales experience, some marketing experience, finance. Let's not talk about it. But then what this will do is bring up my level of knowledge and awareness to what it should be for like a startup. Not necessarily me having to do it. Is it like give me the awareness so I know who to look for that can help me potentially work with me on it? Is that right, or is it more like,
So,
hey, you should know this. Here's a template. Here's like a P&L sheet that you can fill out.
both. So
Looking at Alvin,
we do offer
like,
both.
you can give me a sheet.
Yeah, so we do offer both. So once they have established a certain basic awareness about how they can actually offer tangible skill set to the business, then that's where the office hours are all about, like sitting through sessions and talking to them and them saying that, hey, Neil, through all this series of modules together with you and Alvin, I think I come to a point that I understand I may have need to operate my business as a service provider first, me being a solopreneur.
Right.
So there's no shame to that. So we actually prefer that because you're putting yourself into servicing clients, generating some revenue. You don't have to start off building a magnificent tech product, over-engineer it, and then realize that there's no market need for it.
Right.
So from there on, once they get a bit of market validation, collecting insight, then the second challenge is, can you scale that? So then that's where they will put in, they will actually then question themselves, hey, if I were to scale myself, what do I need?
Right.
Do I need a tech component? Do I need to hire more people? Then that's where the branching out process starts. Or if I were to hire a lot more people and service what I can service to my client, I'll be running as an agency model. But agency model themselves do not have a very significant differentiator or cannot scale as fast as a venture type business. So that's where maybe then I should actually start looking for a CTO, one option.
Right.
Two, or I look for a software development house that I can start build my MVP.
Right.
But at least, because it's also covered in our program, that you as a lead founder, we call it, able to map out the experience you want because you have so much insight interacting with your clientele.
Right.
There must be a journey that can map it out, and then you can communicate to an engineer, a full stack front end, back end engineer, that because you are a product visionary, you should be also honing the product manager role. So that is the least you can do for the first year in our program,
Right.
and that's where all these little templates, building blocks we call it, would help them to have quite a solid version 1 MVP, and they are buffered, or rather they are cushioned by a very solid revenue track record. So the good thing is that most of our Guide Founders program attendees, they are revenue generating, even though they are not scalable yet, but they are sustainable business model. Yeah.
So this is like we say version 3 or 2.1,
So this
1.0.
is like more of a version 2. The
Yeah.
one we are working on is version 3.
Version 3. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of this like iteration process, like how are you thinking about the milestones for like measurement of the success of this? Like, you know what, this is the path. Pour fuel on the fire. Let's freaking go. Like, are you thinking that far ahead just yet, or is like, hey, we're gonna try this, see what the results are like? How do you gauge the success of this?
So we used to
Kind of putting you on the spot, I know.
no problem, because we do also have all these tough questions to ourselves. So we are taking a pause on the Guide Founders program.
Right.
So what we did and doing right now is that we've taken part of the material from Cheong Staff School, because these are some very important skill set we think the founders need to have as well. And also some of the Guide Founders program, all of them, and put it into an e-learning structure. So we used to be very selective, like I mentioned before, is nominated only people that can learn through this process.
Right.
So then now we are challenging, or we're breaking it into 40 over modules, anybody can come and learn. But for those who are very serious about it, we gonna launch this in our roadmap, in our pipeline, that we'll relaunch a guide fellowship program.
Right.
So that is for people that we want to double down our time, and even, there's more skin in the game in helping them to be successful. So now knowledge is truly democratized for everyone, whether you are just somebody that's curious about startup and venture knowledge, somebody that's aspiring executives that want to land a job in startup and the innovation ecosystem. Maybe you just want to be a VC analyst, investment analyst, but you want to know how things are operated on the other side of the world, or even current and aspiring entrepreneurs who are going through this journey themselves. So we're no longer getting this knowledge anymore. Yeah.
Okay.
So that is the significant upgrade in a way in terms of structure, and going down even deeper in terms of the insights and the building blocks we can provide.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So this 40, it's basically on-demand e-learning
Correct.
phase 1.
Correct.
Then you have the fellowship, which is kind of the phase 2.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that's going to be a bit more hands-on with
Very selected.
yeah.
Very elite type support.
elite. I like
Yeah.
that. Highly
Make it
competitive.
sound cool.
Yeah.
It's basically just us spending more time.
Yeah. But the phase 1 where pretty much it's open to anyone, I suppose, again, leveling the playing field of access to what it really takes to kind of start that entrepreneurial journey. Then you have the second phase, which is I'm guessing that first phase isn't access to real people. It's more just pure e-learning. Like, this is all the stuff that you need to know. What's the outcome that you can expect from that then?
So there's still a office hour component to it.
Okay.
Yeah, there's still.
Right, nice.
So it is still 12 months. So once you have access to learning paths,
Yeah.
you can learn at your own pace. There's just fundamental things it's mandatory for you to finish off. Like understanding what's the difference between a startup, a SME versus a venture. So this kind of basic stuff you have to go through, and after that you can pick and choose whatever domain you want to sharpen or fill in the gaps. Sales and marketing, capital finance, service and product, people. I think people and culture is one of it as well. Then data and analytics. So these are 5 major domains you can pick and choose and do it in your own time. Within that 12 months, the outcome through all this session, whether it's career coaching, whether it's
Do you want to get that?
sorry, no, okay. So whether
Could be
it's
a term sheet.
No, it's not.
You'd answer it otherwise, I know.
Yeah. So yeah, whether it's career coaching in guiding them through this journey, any point of time, they may be super ready to say, hey, Neil, Alvin, after 3 months or after 6 months, I've consumed all your content. I'm ready to jump into a startup. Could you land me a job? We can help them. For an entrepreneur, hey, Neil, Alvin, I want to start a startup. I think I got a fair, good concept about what I'm getting myself into. What's next? So we want to get to that action point.
Right, okay.
So it will happen within that 12 months period, or even more. If they still want to continue access to it, they can still resubscribe to that access, and it will be there for them. Keep on expanding that 40 modules, going out even deeper. So that will be a hub for them to know everything about venture. To be part of.
How much is it?
We haven't quite decided on the price yet. We're gonna soon
Give it away
announce
for free.
No, it's not free.
I think that's a philosophical argument
Yeah.
that we've had. I think there could be a point in time where it could become free, but
Doesn't it devalue it though? If there's no commitment for like.
so that's the thing, right? Like it's gonna be balancing.
Yeah.
Again, the I think that's been our word of the day. Right?
It has like how because I was watching something with you guys familiar with Tony Robbins,
Yeah.
the self-development
Yep.
guru. It's not like it's just a thought I had. Like it's not necessarily a moral dilemma. It's just like you're charging people to make them happy. Like, shouldn't if you have that ability to like coach people and guide people, shouldn't you give it away for free? And in my mind, it's like, well, not really. It's like, otherwise, you can't do it. So, like, you need to be able to capitalize on it in order to continue to do it for more and more and more people. If you gave it away for free, number one, it devalue it. Number two, you can't scale it. You can't give it to more and more people, right?
So I think from maybe this is a bit of my thinking process around it, right? Like I think as the base level kind of maturity of the audience goes up, then there are certain things that then become like these are pure giveaways because it's been there for a while, and it's now only catering to a smaller group of audience who maybe are maybe late to the party kind of thing, right? Like, and it's also a challenge for ourselves to kind of continuously build more value into the learning paths where it becomes more and more worthwhile to pay, right? So I think that's kind of like that balance of what we're thinking about. I think so that's kind of one of the things that drives in terms of that roadmap for what the learning paths could be. Right. Right now it's module based. We have some thinking around like, potentially things like real life case studies, right? More lived experiences being in there, and that become like unlocked at a later date, right? Like, but so that's kind of like we haven't kind of fully figured that whole pricing dynamic out. Right?
I like how you're going through your startup journey and helping other startups go through that journey because you're living the
because
experience.
we're living it. Right?
It's like, look, we've been through this, we go through this, and I think
Yeah.
that's why I wanted to kind of speak to you guys as well, because you're not like, it's not fully fledged, like fully fleshed out. This is like, but you are kind of going through that experience and like that iteration of. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about this journey you're on is like, well, as you kind of change things up, or maybe don't say pivot, but evolve like the offering, what's the kind of North Star, either metric or vision that you kind of keep in your mind is like, and then you can both come back to, like when you're having a debate about where you want to go to, it's like, does this do X, like the thing that we set out to do? Do you have that like in mind? Is that?
I think if there is a kind of like one particular thing or metric, I think the impact from what we aim to achieve is really work with, touch with, have an engagement with a large number of people who want to, we're thinking of are already entrepreneurs, right? And just that's the singular number, right? Like how many people do we interact with through the programs or through the learning paths or through some of like more formal engagements through the advisory. That's like number one thing. Like, I mean, short of then the second part would be like how much do we generate out of this? Right. But that one number is like how many people do we actually get to speak to, get to be part of their journeys, work alongside them, work with them, turn them. Some maybe end up being paying clients, some might not. But that's kind of like that list of people, like within our, I don't know what you call that. Like it's not really a CRM, but that kind of like list of people gets longer
spreadsheet,
and longer, right? Yeah.
Go on. Now, I was just curious because obviously as kind of founders of an organization, the number of decisions you have to make, like small and large on a daily basis, is pretty big. So I was wondering, like, and probably, I don't know if this is a loaded question, like, do you have like a unifying question that you come back to in order to direct the business? And if I sowed a seed, it was like, does this enable entrepreneurs to have the best possible outcome for their business? And it's like, well, if it doesn't, then okay, maybe we need to do this. So for example, it's a chief of staff school. Well, does this enable entrepreneurs to have the best possible outcome for their business? Maybe not. And then maybe you can prioritize that from all the different decisions you have to make. Do you have question? How do you make decisions to direct the business?
Maybe I can share mine first.
Yeah.
I think for the recent months or this particular recent time frame, most of the decisions surrounds how much of opportunistic revenue that I want to be involved in chasing and making sure it goes through versus what are the fundamental things that I have to pause and actually build it. Because the underlying reason is that if we have this foundational bedrock, it would actually catalyze scaling.
Okay.
which is going back to what Alvin said. Now, I think the mission or the vision is to how much difference we can make to every individual's venture journey.
Right.
So for example, if chasing an opportunistic deal or a BD opportunity, it will actually halt the development that we want to build in terms of the bedrock. Like for example, all our modules in learning paths and expanding of it, because everything is in our brain. Everything is so. If we were to chase for an advisory work, that would actually pause on that development. So
Right.
I think it's a very disciplinary decision to say, hey, sometimes I just have to let go. I think I'll have to pass to Alvin to take the lead, right?
Right.
So I have to tell myself, because you're the only one that can do it, and we'll need to do it, so
Yeah.
you got to do it. So that is one big decision that I keep on anchoring myself back in my action, and where do I spend time on. So it was very tough. I think it's still very tough. Right?
What do you say no to? Kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yes. What I say
Yeah.
no to, even though it's very, very tempting. It's very natural to you. It's like, hey, all our intuition, all the data points pointing towards a big opportunity that you can almost see and smell.
Yeah.
But then you got to work counter-intuitively, because I think that is also a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, that is facing running a scalable. That's the difference between running a scalable business model versus one that is sustainable but it's not very scalable. So that's one. And then the second part is that as we build that process, build whatever products or program, we got to also think, when you talk about, because I think the whole point is democratizing venture knowledge.
Right.
And unfortunately, knowledge, there's a cost to content. There's a cost to accessing knowledge. And what we are talking about is merely than just, we're talking about socioeconomic status for
Right.
Malaysia. For example, for Malaysia to start a company versus someone in Singapore to start a company versus somebody in Bangladesh, somebody from Kazakhstan, for example. So how do we build Guide or whatever we're going to offer accessible in a very equal basis for a student in Malaysia can access to it. Similarly, a Kazakh student can also access to it. So one thing we have been talking about and we have modeled it out is that we may actually there's a high chance we can apply purchasing power parity to our program fee to level
Tell
the
me
playing
more.
field. To really level the playing field of everybody truly accessible to equal opportunity to start their own company or
Right.
to join a venture ready company. So we actually apply just sourcing a lot of World Bank data and United Nations data. So all this data will come together and really look into their each and every GDP, PPP adjusted GDP in all the members country of Asia, and we are correcting all our base price to this index.
In short summary, are you saying the price will fluctuate depending on where you're located?
Correct.
Okay.
So yeah, correct. So there will be the mature ecosystem will pay slightly higher than that of somebody come from a developing economy.
But technically in line from a percentage point of view in terms of disposable income, for example,
Correct.
it would be on a par,
Correct.
like globally,
Correct.
rather than saying $50 for everywhere.
For everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Correct.
That's cool.
So that's the length we have to go to really deliver what we said and close to our value. Yeah. So yeah, maybe that's one day there will be a huge portion when we have shared enough knowledge. We think the world has a fair amount of understanding of venture knowledge. Then perhaps there will be component that it should be free. Right?
Why do you think it hasn't been done already?
It is also the same question why a lot of entrepreneur support organizations usually, especially the ones that are more noble, they are actually mostly non-profit. But there are also the other side of the coin. You will see more VCs are capitalizing on this as well. So, for example, right, there are VCs that teaches you, but in return, you gotta you gotta pay X amount of equity for that check,
Right.
and you're also paying on behalf of other people in the cohort.
Right.
So only the ones who actually gotten the investment check,
Yeah.
you have to pay a certain sum back to them as a program fee.
I know who you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then we question, from the business understanding, we understand why. Right? There's always a cost to a program running the operation and whatnot. But then that is opposing the philosophy of open knowledge.
Right.
So we try to balance between how do we run like a Wikipedia, and also how do we run like a venture company that's scalable, right? So
Yeah,
we
good luck
always
with that.
covering-
Yeah.
It's tough, but we
Yeah.
we like to go through this cognitive exercise and build a organization or an institution for humanity at large
Yeah.
without sacrificing our
Sanity.
goal.
Yeah. No, so I think to a certain extent it comes back to a lot of the things that we talked about in the beginning, right? Like why when we came together,
Yeah.
we talked about this as potentially this being a 10-year cycle.
Yeah.
Because it is a hard thing to do, right? And it's hard to achieve like maximum profitability in your formative years. And I think like we've passed that stage of formative years now, and putting a bit of pressure on ourselves to kind of like make this work. But it is a hard problem to solve, and it's hard not simply because of just the effort, right? It's more the incentive alignment. And yeah, so maybe, and I don't have the right answer to whether will we be 100% successful.
Come on,
right?
man. I was expecting
But-
like all these
but-
nuggets of wisdom.
Yeah,
like,
but what I'm
100%
saying
right.
is,
I'm going to hold you to this.
yeah, but what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
like, there are certain things that maybe a SWAT team of 2 people are better equipped to do than a corporate team of 100 people.
Right.
Right? Like, and I think, and it's probably in a very different sense, the world might just lose the 2 of us to entrepreneurship and go nowhere.
Yeah.
And the world would still be the same, right? As opposed to like, large companies spending a huge amount of money trying to build, I don't know whatever we call it, right? Venture builders, accelerators. Some have been successful, some have not been successful. But the net is that a lot of money have been spent. Whether are we achieving the same I would like to think that potentially we can achieve the same results as opposed to companies who have spent a large amount of money. So to that whole point, right, like again between the both of us, it's like why we kind of stick it out through this journey. I think it's a very simple realization, and I've talked about this even in my time of running GoCo, right? Like it's a very simple equation. If you have money, you can compress time, right? If you don't have money, then you need time to kind of like evolve organically.
Right.
And I think you know where we are in that stage, right?
You're a startup, of course I do.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's and like this would be kind of things that I'd say from our point of view, and like to your point about like decision making process, a lot of it comes back down to opportunity costs.
Yeah.
Right? And in terms of like the decision making processes of what goes into our roadmaps, what do we do, who do we look for, it comes back to kind of aligning that I still kind of want to double down on like this whole idea of common sense being more available. And I think like Neil shared a lot about like potential knowledge gaps, and I think like the other equation of a lot of things that we've done in the previous iterations of the programs and the Chief of Staff School ultimately is that a lot of the potential success and failures and decision making points for a lot of startup falls around like actually the psychological part of it.
Right.
Like how well do you know yourself? How well do you know the conditions for you to win, the conditions for you to lose, your surrounding parameters, whether it's family, relationships, and so on. And it ought to be a bit more talked about. It ought also to be a bit more
You asked me where
prevalent in discussions.
That's where the company name came from.
Yeah.
The whole Mindem kind of thing, right?
Yes.
It's a mindset thing. I
Yeah.
think so I'm a firm believer in that, like hard skills, like ability to code,
Yep.
ability to like understand a P&L. You can have all of that.
All of that,
But if you don't have the ability to get up every day and persevere and have
Yeah.
that mindset, be like, everything is terrible
Yeah.
and I'm still gonna keep going, rather than everything's terrible, I'm just gonna stay in
Yeah.
bed. It's like there's no point in having all these skills if you can't do anything with them. So that's where the whole concept of the mind and
Yeah.
kind of thing came from, and that's why I wanted to talk to you guys
Yeah.
as well. And that was going to be my follow-on question, like what you're talking about in terms of self-awareness and like how you deal with your own emotions, like emotional intelligence.
Yep.
It's like, well, how do you tap into that EQ, knowing full well I don't know, it seems crude to say you can monetize it, but basically if you don't have a high level of EQ, especially if you're going through hyper stressful situations, like how am I going to make money at the end of the month? Like
Yep.
if you can't deal with that and understand the mindset you need to be in, you're in for a tough time.
Correct.
It's going to be difficult.
And in my experience, right, like, and I've seen this continuously over time as well. So, when I first spoke to Ron about what was Gold Coast trajectory in terms of like our fundraising process and then our journey and what do we actually want, right? Like, in his mind for a very long time, he wanted to be the next Traveloka. This was like, it predates me, right? Like, in his mind, it's like, yeah, I know I have the technology skill sets and the chops to do a lot of things. You know, I've growth hacked, I've done things that, you know, people have not thought about, right? And kind of build that company from that perspective. Very lean, bootstrapped, profitable at that point in time. And then his whole point was that, yeah, I know, why shouldn't it be us, right, raising that 50 million round and then being the next Traveloka? And why was Traveloka the one that, you know, raised that kind of money? And I mean, it's through no fault of his, right? Like, I think he has that point and that idea and that ambition, but it's a wildly different business strategy to go after that path, right? It takes a whole other entire DNA shift, organizational shift, mindset shift to manage that kind of money and grow at the pace that you're expected to grow.
Right.
And I think like over time we made peace with like not raising that monstrous round and then being a bit more like how should I say, grounded in our expectations of how we want to grow,
right?
The kind of valuations we expected to exit at, and what kind of monies we will make for ourselves and our shareholders, right? Like this was obviously pre-COVID, but and like if I translate a lot of that context today, right, and where I see kind of that, other than the knowledge gap, that kind of like this missing piece in terms of like this whole thought process about self-awareness is like, for a lot of founders who are starting their journeys today, right? And if the whole point of like raising, raising capital to pay yourself a decent salaries because you left your good cushy corporate job, right? That still exists. That's still, I wouldn't say a problem, but that kind of thinking processes has a way to kind of like mess up your fundraising thought process, your fundraising strategy, and the kind of business that you want to build and grow, right? And I think these are kind of like that psychological aspects that are not nearly talked about enough, whether in situations like this, in conferences, in workshops, and everywhere. But it's probably one of the first things that we sit down with an entrepreneur to know, like, how you're doing. What is your personal runway? What if this falls to shits, right? Like, you know, how many times do you think in your life you can pivot this business? Right. It's I think like
pivoting is one thing. Like it's like, oh, we're going to move the business here, but then detaching yourself from the outcome, removing that ego that you might have made a mistake and you need to do something else. Yeah,
it's the kind of questions that you lay down on your bed at night and it's like, well,
what time is it? 4 a.m. Oh god.
Yeah. And we obviously feel the same. So coming back to a lot of your point and your question about like how do we make decisions, we make decisions the same way founders today who keep themselves up until 4 a.m. or can't sleep make decisions, right? Like, okay, so are we generating revenues? Who are the clients who should we prioritize? What's that opportunity cost? I can assure you there's no one way to kind of like make an optimal decision for each and every point.
There's a great book by Chip and Dan Heath called Decisive, Have you read it?
No.
It's worth a read.
Okay.
It just talks about like a frameworks for decision making processes, and I'm not going to say it makes it easier, but then at least it gives you a framework to follow where it's like, okay, if I decide to do this, these are going to be the upside, downside, can I come back from this?
Yep.
Oh, like what would I need to do next? So it's like a more of a strategic book, but then around decision making. In fact, I need to reread that.
Yeah, reread that.
I need to reread that, to be fair.
Yeah.
So I have, in terms of how I think about making decisions, I've got a weird thing about how I make decisions. If I had this has been since 2014, I think. If I had $1 million in the bank, because in my mind $1 million is a lot of money, what would I do? Whether that's like take a job, how would I make a decision right now? And removing the idea of the monetary component away from it, like if it's a salary or like fundraise, like if that wasn't in the picture, it didn't matter. What would I do? Start a podcast.
Yeah.
Go out on my own. Like, so it just kind of, it's a bit of a level set.
Yep.
Like number one. Then the second thing is, who do I want to be? And these are all very very philosophical, and I'm in a fortunate position. I've got a personal runway of some months. It's less than a year, put it that way. Is it less than 6 months? Absolutely. But it's what I want to do, and it's how I kind of, it's how I persevere, and it's like, okay, do I have an idea of how I can monetize things? Absolutely.
Yep.
So that's how I kind of make a decision, like what's the value I want to bring, like who do I want to be, and am I doing this just for the money? So when I sit down and have that thought process, like, okay, this is what I want to do, this is how I'm going to do this, then panic will set in. I'll be like, oh shit,
I need to do this.
And obviously being in sales for so long, and like to your point, it's like, well, data and insights, like it's conversion rates.
Yeah.
So if I need to make money to sustain myself, what do I need to do?
Yeah.
Well, I need to reach out to these 100 people, I'll speak to these 10 people, and then I'll get this.
Yep.
And this is how much I'll charge for this, and this will sustain me for this length of time. Then when you get to like a certain period of time, it's like, shit, I haven't reached out to this many people. But it's not like, how am I going to make this money? It's like, what's the small action that I need to take to get to this thing? I was like, okay. And it's very much like, I think I'm a bit of a control freak in that sense, because I know that the levers you need to pull in order to do the thing or get the thing that you need.
100%. I think that whole idea about the levers that you need to pull, I think that's a very vivid imagination of So what are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things, but perhaps that you need to do today, this week, this month,
and it's very black and white. It's like, at the end of the day, did I do these things? Oh no. I was like, I'm gonna have a bad time. Like, if I don't do this, I'm gonna have a bad time. And the good thing about it as well is like, even if it's when talking about sales, for me, it's sales as an entrepreneur. It's like, we've got to pay the bills. I'm accountable, and I'm also responsible. So if it works out, it's because I did the thing. If it doesn't work out, it's because it didn't do the thing. It's like, there's no one else responsible for that. It's like, it's very cut and dry. So it's like, okay, cool.
Yeah. I mean, I love that, right? Like that, it's a simple articulation, and probably kind of it mimics a lot of like the early conversations that we have with some people. So what are you doing? Where are your first 20 leads coming from? Like, will they love you? Will they like you? Will they not like you? Right? Like, and how do you repeat that for the next 20 and so on? And I think like for some of the experience that we had speaking to some of these guys, right? Ultimately, it's the office hours probably are more valuable than a lot of the content per se, just in itself is, and it's simply because like there's clarity of thought, right? Like, and obviously, like we've gone a long way to kind of answer like how do we make decisions, right? And you've just articulated like, I do this because otherwise I'll run out of money, and then it's like that's common sense, right? Like,
but I think a lot of things get overcomplicated. And I put it down to social media. It's like, oh, you need to do all this. You need to be on LinkedIn and TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, and you need to put this content out and do this blog post. Hey, have you thought about picking up the phone and calling these 5 people, telling them what you're doing, and see if they say yes? Yeah, but they won't answer the phone. Did you try? Like,
I'll try tomorrow.
It makes people a little bit uncomfortable.
No, I fully agree with that, right? Like, and it's sometimes just clarity of thought
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Like that whole idea, like, have you tried? Like, yeah.
I think it's a very uncomfortable question to ask as well, because it's like, is this a story that you're telling yourself that it won't work, or can you prove it to me that it hasn't worked? Well, I called these 10 people and it didn't work. It's like, okay, let me tell you how sales works. Call 150 people and come back to me. Call 1,000 people and come back to me. It's like, we need to kind of test the market, have some conversations, find some referrals, like get the market to validate. I think we kind of went off on a bit of a tangent, but this is the decision-making process and like conversion rates and raw numbers.
Yeah.
It's kind of, I mean, that's why one of the reasons why I went out on my own as well, because there's the accountability and then kind of the control as well. That's what I kind of like, and I think that's the good thing about entrepreneurship as well. It's like you're in control. Like, how can you leverage Guide and people like yourself to help you and provide that clarity of thought? I think that's where a lot of people kind of get tripped up, being overwhelmed, too many decisions to make, and not having the clarity about where they want to go.
True.
I want to know from you guys. I'm gonna let you go in a minute. Don't worry. Why do you keep going? I mean, there's this, everyone gets inspired at some point. You might listen to David Goggins talk about running 1,000 kilometers or whatever. Like, yes, let's go out, let's go to the gym and lift some weights. Then fast forward 6 months, if you haven't got any other inspiration, it's like, well, how do you keep going and keep on mission? Tell me, give me your best.
I think, for me at least, I went through a very obviously long journey trying to build a company. It felt like, I would say we were on the cusp of success, but I think we had a lot of good things going just before COVID. We made some hard decisions before that would have set us up to at least, keep ourselves going and on the attack mode rather than being on a defensive mode. Right?
Yeah.
I think we had both the ambition plus the resources that was needed to kind of become a mildly successful company.
Yeah.
Right? And fit within the parameters that we kind of like initially set out that we would be happy with. And it was a painful process trying to turn that ship around during COVID, and there was a lot of emotional journey and pain that went through during that period as well, both personally and from a business point of view. And so I think there was an initial part of this journey that was a bit of like very self-reflective and kind of like uncovering a lot of the trauma that I went through, and then hoping that others don't go into the same thing. I think that has now translated into like, okay, let's think about winning again. Let's not just think about not losing.
Yeah.
And I think like understanding a lot more in the past couple of years, where while there's still a lot of uncertainty going around the whole world, there is more clarity around certain things, like for certain companies, win conditions, right? And how I believe a lot of my experience in the last 10 years could still be extremely helpful to a lot of founders currently. So I think that there's a lot of that trying to kind of build off what I wish I had in a way, and what I have done in terms of like a lived experience and documenting a lot of that thought processes and decision processes as well, right? Like how do we manage ourselves both in terms of like objective financial numbers versus what we, in our minds, a bit of like the things that was whispered around like closed meeting rooms, that we thought that, okay, these were kind of how, when we were in the war room deciding that this were the kind of like both strategic decisions that we made, and also like on a week to week, like what did we do to improve ourselves.
Have you thought about writing a book?
No.
Or putting it into a 40 module course and call it Guide?
I think there's going to be bits and pieces of that being onto...
That's bullshit, man. It can't be bits and pieces, because this is the thing that people worry about the most. What if this... doing a pre-mortem, like what could kill the business.
Yes.
Like for you lived it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a pre-mortem. It was like, holy shit,
Yeah.
like everything is going to the dogs, like, and you lived that, and then you had to make some hard decisions, and then you come out the other side and you're still alive.
Yep.
Good or bad, it doesn't matter, but the learnings from that, super valuable.
Yeah, no.
Sorry, man.
Short answer.
Basically, people are going to benefit from your pain.
Yeah.
They just are. And that's, I mean, I'd like to kind of dig into that a little bit, but I don't have any tissues, just any tears. But I mean, live like going through that and living through that. And being so, not only that, but you're in finance, right? Being that close to the numbers, it's like, if I'm in sales, I'm like, oh, we didn't close any deals.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm looking at a P&L being like, this is how much we're spending, and this is what's coming in or not, and this is like literally the black and white of the business. That's, to have that, it's like, oh my God. That's...
Yeah, no short answer, no books
Honestly,
no books in the plans.
my palms are getting sweaty just talking about that. I'm like, holy, like, because that's what you look at every day.
Yep.
I mean, maybe consider it.
Yeah.
Or even asking ChatGPT to have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
Like, how did you feel about this? Talk to me about this. Because there's a lot of knowledge there to be shared, man.
I think so, and I think like it's still very, very fresh in the memory.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think why I say there's bits and pieces of that. I think through some of the kind of programs and mentoring that we've done for various different parties, I think I've shared and start to open up. I think there is some like kind of miniature size case studies that I put around like certain decision points, right? I think like the decision point around our Series A funding, I think that was one of the early case studies that we put together for the first cohort of the Guide Founders Program. I think that was kind of one of the ways to at least humanize that process as well, right? What were we thinking about? What was our competitive set? What did pitching look like?
Yeah.
What did our schedule for a day trip to Singapore looks like, right? There's a lot of those things that was kind of I have them in my notes. It's just right now we're thinking of that more around case studies. Yeah.
I want to dig into that a little bit more, but I'm just having a look. I've been chatting to you guys for a while.
Yeah.
For me?
Yeah. Why do you do the things you do? Why do you get out of bed?
To make a statement.
To make a statement?
Yes.
Wow.
Of
Wisdom.
as simple as that, to make a statement.
To who?
I think to myself that I can do it. If others can do it, I can do it too.
What is it?
That it goes back to wanting to be a monk and a soldier. So they're kind of role models, right? And I think we are in a business, I think in consulting, in knowledge disseminating type business or as a surveys. I think this is something is also very personal and something we always talk about, imposter syndrome. Even though, I'm sure because we're not the kind that, we can bluff our way through. I mean, we can if we want to. We're equipped to do that. But there are parts of, I think, our identity, character.
Alvin's kind of staring at me, and I just don't want to make eye contact with him. As soon as you said bluff, he was like,
no, so I think in this journey, even though we're bringing forward a lot of experience that we've been through, sometimes, it's a short burst of crisis that we need to manage. And sometimes all this challenge that we solved and we're solving cannot be measured through the length of time. But the intensity is so real. Like we talk about the emotions of going through being an entrepreneur, saving. I mean, sometimes, putting our own money to save up something. We have to, leverage on so many things. It goes beyond than just serving just a business to make money.
Yeah.
Right. There's a human component to the organization as well, right? So I think for me, it's, hey, if we are building a entrepreneur support type or centric organization or institution that educates other people, or wanting to inspire people to do the same, we have to be the role model. And in order to do that, I got to live what I say, or we have to do the same, right, to prove that point. So hence, I think it all goes back to make a statement that if we say what we say, we also need to practice what we preach. And to the larger extent, then we can innovate out of, combining, like to your point, right? Why isn't there any other organization that's doing this model?
Yeah.
So that is the statement for me personally, I try to make. We may take longer time because we may not have the same leverage as other people in other parts of the world in different circumstances or different conditions. But I think with our wits combined together, like, having the opportunity to join this podcast, things that we are planning forward, I think we have a fairly level of certainty that I think we will get there. Just a matter of amount of time, and how much of that to that raw discipline that we want to put onto ourselves, right? And to your point, how do we prepare our mindset to able to live it through and see through the end?
I think this is going to be an interesting one.
Yeah.
Because you guys are going through this kind of startup phase and the iterations, and will it be successful? Unsure. Like, so you're living the journey of the entrepreneurs that you're going to be serving.
Yes.
Whilst also living the journey of the entrepreneurs without the access that some people put those limiting beliefs on themselves. I don't have access to capital.
Yep.
Is one, like as free flowing cash like you would get in Silicon Valley or wherever else, or even if you're based in Singapore or Indonesia with like specific VC funds focused on those specific markets. If you're based in Malaysia, it's like, I didn't have access to these funds or these founders or this level of knowledge. Well, you can just be like, yeah, neither did we.
Yeah.
Here's the business.
Okay.
Like, I think this is one of the reasons why I reached out to you guys initially to have a chat. It's like, well, this is what you're going through right now. What are the stories that you can kind of pull out from you, hopefully, so other people can get a bit more inspired? Be like, look, these guys are going to do it. There's a support network out there and people working towards helping entrepreneurs or those aspiring entrepreneurs. It's like, there is a support there. Yeah. It is, but then a lot of people might not know where to find it.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's my hope that we can get it out there a little bit more and people can find you as well.
I mean, that's kind of the reality of the two things that I mentioned earlier. One was that venture-backed businesses are not the norm, right? Yeah. And also to the point where I shared about how Ron and myself, when we talked about our fundraising narrative, it was like, we want to be that company that raises a $50 million, and that's also not normal, right? Even from a position where we've raised good amounts of seed capital to do whatever it is that we were doing at that point in time. It's like, you want to, I wouldn't say this it's not a point about limiting the ambition, right? It's also knowing what is that most realistic milestone for you to achieve your dreams or your ambition, right? It's not about limiting that, but like there are many ways to skin the cat.
Yeah.
Right? And it does not always involve like a $50 million fundraise or immediate fundraise in the immediate term. And to that point, like, there's no shame in running a business and trying to find clients and make revenue and turn a profit at the end of the year and pay yourself so that you can sleep well at night.
That'd be
right?
nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would be nice. That's like a dream of a lot of people working 9 to 5 in a corporate environment. And why would it be something that we should normalize and say that, for you to start a business and for you to be a high growth company, that you need to have permanent access to capital? It's I wouldn't say it's like not merited, but it's also shouldn't be entirely normalized, right? Like
It's not the only way.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
you're saying, there's many ways to kind of skin a cat, and I think it's how you determine your own success as well.
Yep.
And it's weird to say that raising VC money is not normal, because there seems to be an echo chamber, especially when you're in like the startup world, right?
Yeah.
Everyone raises money.
Yeah.
Everyone raises money.
If
but
I
then-
can do it, you should be able to do it too.
but,
Right?
but it's like, this is what you should be doing.
Yeah.
So it's weird. Obviously, you've got all these thought leaders and all that kind of stuff on LinkedIn as well, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, everyone's
Yeah.
smashing quota, everyone's doing this, everyone's
Yeah.
but it's actually, well, are they?
Yeah.
And it's like this. I spoke about it earlier, maybe not in this one, but comparison being the thief of joy. Yeah, I spoke to you about it. Like in terms of highly competitive, it's like, well, you're comparing yourself to all these people. It's like, yeah, but how do they define success?
Yep.
And it doesn't really matter. Like you see people on social media or whatever it is, or these people have raised like 100 million. It's like, well, are they happy? Is this how they're determining success? Like, are they able to sleep at night? What's the cap table like? What's the term sheet like? What was the growth they've promised? Like, what is the stress they have to go through?
Yep.
It's like, do you want to commit to that? Like, what are you willing to like lay down for?
Yeah.
Like, what are you most happy with? Have you ever heard of the guy called Earl Nightingale? It's like super old school.
No.
The Strangest Secret.
No.
So the strangest secret is you become what you think about.
Okay.
Is this the idea? You become what you think about all day long. And it's like he talks about it in the audio he has, and it's super super old. But I used to listen to it quite a lot. The determination, or what's the word I'm looking for? How he determines success. The progressive realization of a worthy ideal. The progressive realization of a worthy ideal. So whatever that worthy ideal is for you. And he talks about being a successful housewife, or like a successful business person, or a successful person who works 9 to 5, but they get up and they walk the dog in the morning, they're super relaxed, and they can go in, they're really good at their job, and then they clock out at 5 p.m. after being really good at it, and their dream is to go home and take care of the kids and spend time with the family and all this. And it's like they're doing it with the intention and the purpose for that reason, not to strive for what everyone else has, the BMWs that the cousin has, or being an engineer, or being a doctor. And I think that's where the idea of, well, if I had $1 million in the bank, like what's the decision that I would make for me, not for anyone else. I think people determine success on their own terms. Yeah. It sounds, again, it's all this woo-woo ideology, kind of like, oh, you world of utopian, so that it's not so black and white. It really isn't.
Yeah, and I think that's probably, if I want to kind of sum up, like there's probably this maybe a bit more Asian spirit of entrepreneurship versus a little bit of what's more heroic Americanized version of it, right? And yeah, I think there's a lot of what we do today. I think also the other aspect of why this not been done is that I don't think a lot of what we do today would be a kind of like a typical working business model,
right,
in the US, right? For a variety of reasons, right? There's maturity levels and so on. But that whole kind of like individualism, capitalist way of just thinking about like, if I want to do something, I want it to be big, I want to be fast, I want to be like super valuable, right? Does not always and does not easily translate to a lot of the business landscape here. So I think there's to the whole point about whether do entrepreneurs have it harder here, easier here? Should they think how privileged being an entrepreneur is, right? I think that's kind of like a good starting point to ask themselves a bit of that question that you asked yourself, right? Like, if I had $1 million, like how would I kind of like focus my time? And it's probably the other way of thinking about, right? If you need to run your business profitably and you kind of like don't think about that money being that constraint, how would you build up the revenues of the business? How
Yep.
would you use and leverage upon like what you know today, who you know today, your network, and have an awareness around that, right? Like,
Yeah.
for those who are kind of like, I mean, from a finance perspective, I always use fundraising as an example, and you know, obviously a lot of people complain about access to capital, etc. That there is an obvious thing around, like, you know, I don't want to glorify it's the who you know kind of thing,
Mm.
but you do need to make kind of like conscious effort to build trust, to build, and more so in this part of the world. Yeah.
Yes. Relationships,
Yeah.
trust, credibility. Who knows you?
Yeah.
Like who can be for
So
all-
your body of work as
Yeah.
an entrepreneur, I
Yeah.
think, has to be a lot more kind of like well-rounded,
Mm.
and not just in terms of like your experience, you know, or your expertise, but also kind of like building up that kind of people who kind of believe in what you do
Yeah.
as a good base to start, right?
People who believe in what you do, or people who believe in who you are. Because, for example, if I go and reach out to a few people that I might know and be like,
Yep.
hey, I'm thinking about starting this thing, it's less about what I've
Yep,
done.
for
It's
sure,
more
yeah.
about, okay, well,
Yeah.
he's got some level of integrity. I kind of understand who he is as a person,
Yep.
what he's actually driven to do, and therefore I'll place a bet.
Yep.
It's like,
Yeah.
whatever you kind of choose to do. I'm big on networking, big on relationships.
Yeah.
That's why I kind of always hounding you guys. Hey, let's go for a beer. Let's go have a coffee. And like,
Yeah, it's been a while.
yeah, it really
Yeah.
has. But I think that aspect of it, I think it might be missed a little bit.
Yeah.
Final thoughts. Well, piece of advice. I'm not going to give any advice. One piece of advice from you. Like, if you had one piece of advice that you might want to give to any kind of aspiring entrepreneur,
I like sports analogies.
hit me with a sports analogy.
So
Hopefully, it's not the Roy Keane one.
I mean, a lot of how would I put this? It's like, you know, going through my experience as a CFO, as somebody who, you know, said no to a lot of things, like said no to
Everything.
spending money in general.
Yeah, paying your bills.
If anything, people should be giving us money, right? I like to think that there is probably two aspects for early stage founders, which I hope to see a lot more of. I think one is you want to start building your business with a kind of like clear set of assumptions, right? Like, and then you kind of like zero base everything. You don't start anything from like, oh, here's what I did before, and you know, I'll just discount it by 25% or 30% or 50%, and then this is going to be my target, right? I think it's like you kind of zero base your budgeting process of everything, right? Like if you want to pick up the phone and call 1,000 customers, okay, if you yourself are going to do it, right, these are the number of hours that we need to spend per day, per week, per month,
Right.
to hit that, right? And that's exactly what you put in your to-do list, right? You kind of like zero base. You can't just say like, oh, I'll reach 1,000 by the end of this month, because that's worth nothing, right? Like you find yourself trying to like pick up 2 phones, call 2 people at the same time on the 28th day. Like I think, and that mindset probably should get into a lot of every other area as well. Like you just zero base your assumptions, like, okay, what is the effort that I need to put in to do this right, and what is the exact outcomes that I should. And the other thing, because I guess that works into, you know, from a sporting perspective, right? Like how I'd like to think about, you know, the financial process of it is that as much as you want to say no to everything that doesn't make you money, you if you think about building a sports team, you want to find the right people for the right positions, right? and the right people to do the right set of things, and not just because this person came from this shiny new club or this shiny place or whatever. So a lot of that is like, if you need to kind of like the role of the entrepreneur, absent somebody who wears like a CFO financial hat, is that you can't do everything alone, right? You can't be the general manager plus the outfield players plus the coach plus everything else, right? So put a lot of kind of like thought process around like what's that ideal team that you're building, and when you're kind of like allocating money and budget and how you're going to fund it, it goes towards building this team that will help you win, right? And then you kind of use that as the basis of what is the business that you're going to build, right? Because then that needs the kind of resources that so it goes back to my point about zero basing everything, right? Yeah. So yeah.
So the key takeaway there is zero base everything.
Yep.
Okay. Advice. I know you don't like to give out advice. Normally people have to pay for it.
I think I will share this to aspiring entrepreneurs who are still hesitant, unsure about themselves, or maybe imposter syndrome, or maybe whatever, social media is bombarding on them, scaring them. They're probably sitting in, still working a 9-to-5 job, but then they have dreams to chase, right? I think entrepreneurship starts when we ask others if they actually need help, right? What of help I can offer, right? So just go out from the office, ask people what I can do to help you. Start with that statement, and there are so many problems that other people are also facing, and potentially you can offer help. So that's it. So that's the simple step to think and behave more entrepreneurial, and start from there. People will actually show you the way to be helpful, and you'll be valuable to the market. I think that's where the reason why I say this, because there is a bit of a background. There's a backstory, because I actually didn't being trained as a business person. I didn't actually get formal business related training. So I actually studied marine geology. I did a master's degree, and
you did
to
a
abandon
master's degree.
Yes.
Okay.
And so stepping back and sort of abandoning what I've trained for, it's a very tough thing to do, to pivot. So, but how did I actually navigate to where am I today, where I am today? Is to really talk to people and offer and relook into some of the skill set, hard skill set, like what you said, Greg, and making put good use into them, right? But you have to have a conversation. It's interactive. So entrepreneurship is not so much. I also realized through the journey of being an entrepreneur, it's not so much about ourselves. It's mostly how we want to be relevant to other people, to the society at large. So yeah, that's it.
Be of service.
Yes, essentially.
Be useful.
That's have you read Arnold Schwarzenegger's new book?
No.
That's one of his life mantras. Be useful.
Be useful. Oh.
And I think that's a great way to end. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Yes. Pleasure to be here.
This has been the Mind'em podcast. Thank you so much for listening. It was my goal to give you as much value as possible, and I hope you've got that from this one. Question for you, based on what you heard: how will you think differently, and what will be the next best action step that you can take? If you'd like to be a guest, or simply like to have a conversation with myself and the team, feel free to reach out on any of our social channels. Go forth, be awesome, make a difference. Peace out.